Hi, everybody. We're going to get started. It is 9:32 a.m. on Tuesday. Oh, today is not that date. It is June 18th, 2024. And we are here for Environment Committee, the last Environment Committee before the fall. Councillor Hill has advised that he'll be unable to attend today's meeting. And with that, I'll just ask the clerk's office to do the roll call, please.
Councillor Brockington. Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Kavanaugh. Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Luloff.
Present.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Vice Chair Carr.
Present.
I'll try again for Councillor Kavanaugh. And Chair Menard. You have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And I want to recognize that our meeting is taking place on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory today. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, seeing none. Are the minutes, the 11th of the Environment and Climate Change Committee of Tuesday, the 21st of May, 2024 confirmed? Thank you very much. So we have several items today. One is a motion that kind of got kicked around the last few months that I understand will be changing from Councillor Brockington from several months ago, as the province has also signaled some changes on this. The other is the solid waste master plan, the solid waste long-range financial plan, and the tree program review and tree equity analysis. So we've got a few things to deal with. Councillor Brockington, just to start the meetings, I think we'll have presentations on each. And so we'll start with your motion. But before we do that, I just wanted to say just a few quick words just about to thank staff that have been working in the environment and climate change team, and in particular, Andrea Flowers. She's been around our table for, I guess, six years now, and it's been 14 years that she was with the city and really did an incredible job navigating kind of shifting times in our city. You know, relying on funds like the Hydro Ottawa dividends to accomplish core functions like developing energy evolution, decarbonizing buildings, and adding electric buses to the OC Transport fleet. The relationships that she built and formed with the community really helped build trust in the city and made our very effective partnership programs possible, including the Better Home Loans program, the Better Buildings Ottawa program, and Rain Ready Ottawa, and expressed a lot of deep knowledge. So, you know, I just want to thank Andrea for all that service that she provided, and wish her well in her journey, and to sincerely thank the team that she helped to build here that has served us really well in this committee. So with that, Councillor Brockington, I think we'll get to your motion now. So the motion is changing as I understand it. Can we get that motion, the revised motion, up on the screen, please? So Councillor Brockington, can you just read that in so everyone is aware of this? This was about organic material to the landfill, and it was at the council agenda, I think, about 6 months ago. So it's in front of us again today.
Thanks, Jerry. Yes, there's been some back and forth with staff and certainly a revised motion before us. It was going to be a direction, but given that this is direction to liaise with the association, we are amending this to a motion. So whereas methane is a powerful GHG that is 25 times more potent than CO2 emissions, is one of the most significant greenhouse gases emitted from managing waste and is caused by decaying organic waste in landfill. And whereas methane is both a powerful GHG and short-lived compared to carbon dioxide, any increased diversion from landfill of organic material will have an exponentially significant effect on reducing GHG emissions from the city's waste operations and community emissions from waste disposal in private landfills, aligning with council's climate change goals. And whereas the provincial government has previously indicated their intent to ban organic waste from landfills across Ontario by 2030 to reduce harmful emissions from landfills. And whereas staff were advised through recent discussions with the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks that the ban is no longer a priority initiative at this time. Therefore, be it resolved that staff and solid waste services are directed to work with Councillor Brockington as the Association of Municipalities of Ontario representative for the city and AMO staff to advocate to the MECP for a ban on organics from landfill across the province be advanced as a priority by or before 2030. Therefore, be it resolved, further resolved, that this motion replace the current motion listed as item 4 on today's agenda, and therefore be it further resolved that this motion be submitted to council for consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So the motion has changed substantially, and it looks at an advocacy role for you with AMO, and staff are in support of the motion. Are there any questions or comments on the motion? Okay, with that, can we carry the motion? All right, thanks very much for that. We're now moving along to the solid waste master plan. So we're going to have a staff presentation. We have, I believe it's 5 speakers registered, and there's no additional correspondence. So we'll hear from the speakers after the presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to our excellent solid waste master plan team.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous. My name is Alain Gontier. I'm the General Manager for Public Works, and I'm proud to be here to reintroduce some of our incredible solid waste and finance staff as we present Ottawa's long-term plan for managing waste in our community over the next 30 years. The waste plan is accompanied by a new long-range financial plan for solid waste, which sets out how we will keep waste services cost-effective and affordable in the long term. So today, I'm joined by Shelley McDonald, Director of Solid Waste Services, Nicole Hoover-Bienez, Program Manager for Solid Waste's Long-Term Planning Team, and Isabelle Jasmine, Deputy City Treasurer. Maintenant, nombreux d'entre vous ont participé à la séance d'information technique du 7 juin, au cours de laquelle nous avons donné d'autres détails sur ces 2 initiatives. Vous pouvez toujours visionner cette séance d'information technique sur la chaîne YouTube de la Ville. Nous tenons à remercier ceux et celles qui ont participé et qui l'ont visionné en ligne. Nous savons que la consultation est un aspect essentiel de l'élaboration de ce plan et de son succès. Et nous sommes vraiment reconnaissants de l'intérêt que vous portez à cette question. The Solid Waste Master Plan and the accompanying long-range financial plan are being tabled for committee and council approval and have been built on a foundation of extensive research, stakeholder input, industry best practices, and technical expertise over the last 5 years. And I think I speak for the entire project team when I say that we're very proud to be presenting you this comprehensive plan. Permettez-moi maintenant de céder la parole à Shelley McDonald.
Good morning. As Alain mentioned, it's a very exciting day for the team sitting at the table today for our city, our residents, and the future as it pertains to waste management. Waste management is a core service. Next slide, please. Thank you. The safe, efficient, and sustainable management of waste directly affects the health and cleanliness of our entire community and is made more complex with growing populations, changing waste composition, as well as industry and lifestyle trends that are impacting the quantities and contents of waste which require management. Today, we'll be presenting the Solid Waste Master Plan recommendations, an overview of the planning framework, the objectives, actions, outcomes, and timelines of the waste plan, and an overview of Engagement Series 3. Concurrent to the waste plan's development, Isabelle and her team created a new long-range financial plan for solid waste services. This LRFP directly supports the future funding of solid waste. Isabelle will provide an overview of the current funding model, future funding of solid waste services, and a municipal cost comparison before getting into the LRFP report recommendations. Next slide, please. Before getting into the specifics of the report, I first want to set the stage for what we will be discussing, the scope of our city's waste services. The city is mandated to provide curbside residential properties with waste and organics collection. However, as a result of past council approvals, we provide waste management services to multi-residential properties, small businesses, on-street receptacles, schools, and parks. The collection of waste from the industrial, commercial, and institutional waste sector, as well as the responsibility of waste for the construction and demolition sector, falls under the purview of the province. For the purposes of the Solid Waste Master Plan and the Long Range Financial Plan, staff have included all sectors currently mandated and/or approved to be serviced by the city. Next slide, please. So with that reminder and the stage setting of the scope of the city's solid waste services, I'd like to formally dive into the first part of today's presentation, Ottawa's Solid Waste Master Plan. Next slide, please. The Solid Waste Master Plan report recommendations are as follows: that Council approve of the Solid Waste Master Plan, including actions and initiatives to support Ottawa's future waste management system. In approving the Solid Waste Master Plan, Council is approving the framework that will guide solid waste management activities and policy development. It also outlines the resources and funding required to meet the goals of the plan. The second recommendation seeks Council's direction for staff to immediately begin the planning and implementation for action suites scheduled for year 1 of the Solid Waste Master Plan, with an update on the implementation progress to be provided 12 months post-implementation. There will be multiple touch points with Council to provide updates and seek necessary approvals on critical decisions moving forward, including when new policies, strategies, and feasibility studies and business cases are developed. Every year, staff will present a progress report to Council on the various initiatives that were approved for planning and implementation the year before. Staff will also present the next year's work plan and seek Council's approval to proceed with that work. The waste plan will also be refreshed every 5 years to ensure the city remains adaptable and flexible to new trends and regulatory changes that may come forward. Lastly, this report recommends that Council receive the What We Learned report from Engagement Series 3. This is attached to supporting document 2. Next slide, please. This is a very familiar slide to most of you. Developing this plan has been a 5-year process. We started our journey in 2019 with the previous term of Council approving the framework for the plan's development, the comprehensive communication and engagement strategy, and the Councillor Sponsors Group, which proved and continues to be invaluable to our project's success. In 2020, despite the world slowing down due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we went full steam ahead. Phase 1 is highlighted in blue on this timeline and provided Council with key baseline information and data on the city's current waste management system, available mechanisms to influence waste reduction and diversion, an overview of detailed international research on emerging policy, program, and technology trends, and provided Council with an overview of the proposed engagement approach. This phase was received by Council in June 2020. Phase 2, as shown in blue and green on the timeline, involved engaging with stakeholders on the vision statement, guiding principles and goals that would provide a framework for the waste plan. This phase also involved identifying future waste management needs, the long list of options to be considered to meet these needs, and the evaluation methodology to evaluate each option to develop a short list of options for consultation. Council received Phase 2 in July 2021 and approved the vision statement, guiding principles, and goals for the waste plan. As a reminder, the Council-approved vision for the waste plan is a zero waste Ottawa achieved through progressive, collective, and innovative action, with the goals of the waste plan primarily following the 5 R's waste hierarchy framework that places top priority on reducing or preventing the generation of waste in the first place, followed by recycling, recovery, and final disposal. Zero waste is a philosophy and a call to action rather than an absolute target. Zero waste requires a concerted effort and coordination between all levels of government as well as industry, businesses, and consumers. Phase 3, as shown in green and orange, involved developing the draft waste plan with recommended actions and associated implementation plans and timelines. This was received by Council last fall in 2023. Engagement, whether through engagement series 1, 2, or 3, or touch points with Council and key stakeholders, has been crucial throughout the development of the Solid Waste Master Plan. We said at the onset back in 2019 that engagement with the public, stakeholders, staff, and councillors would be crucial to developing a community-built and bought-into plan. I can confidently say that what we're presenting to you today fits within that goal. And now we've reached the completion Presenting to you, members of Environment and Climate Change Committee today, the Solid Waste Master Plan. I'd now like to hand the presentation over to Nicole to provide an overview of the objectives and action suites.
Thank you so much, Shelley, and good morning, members of committee. Next slide, please. So Shelley had mentioned the first report recommendation is seeking council's approval of the waste plan, including the various recommended actions and initiatives to support Ottawa's future waste management system. So 5 core objectives were developed to present and help measure how the recommended actions will directly work towards achieving the vision and goals of the waste plan. The objectives, as you see here at the top of this slide, follow the waste hierarchy, which is the core policy framework council approved for staff to follow when developing the waste plan. The Solid Waste Master Plan includes 25 proposed action suites and a total of 50 integrated actions that'll work together to drive change and work towards meeting the vision and goals of the Solid Waste Master Plan over the next 30 years. So the recommended actions are multifaceted and interconnected, and the timing for implementation is broken out into the short, medium, and long term. In terms of targets, the waste plan actions aim to overall decrease the amount of waste disposed by our community within households, our city facilities, parks, and public spaces by 15% in 2029 and by 23% by 2034. And a second core target being to increase the amount of organics captured by diversion programs by 14% by 2029 and 20% by 2034. So in terms of the objectives themselves, Objective 1 focuses on waste avoidance, reduction, and reuse initiatives, food waste reduction and education and diversion at special events. The 9 actions under this objective are prioritized for implementation in the short term and are recommended to begin immediately to decrease waste that's generated in the first place. Examples of some of these actions in this suite include events such as repair cafes and supporting and initiating a range of community reuse events and enhancing textile diversion, just to name a few. Objective 2 looks at maximizing the recycling of waste by improving existing initiatives and investing in new recycling programs to reduce the amount of waste going to landfill. Lower life cycle GHG emissions and also create opportunities to gain new revenue streams to help offset waste management costs. The 17 actions under this objective that have the biggest impact on keeping waste out of landfill are recommended for prioritization and implementation in the short term. New programs recommended under this objective include a citywide waste diversion and parks program, a bulky waste reuse and recycling program, just to name a few. The 10 actions within Objective 3 look at recovering resources and energy in keeping with the Solid Waste Master Plan guiding principles to treat waste as a resource. So a number of the actions supporting this objective are already underway as a result of council direction. So as council will recall, a motion was approved during the tabling of the draft waste plan for the city to advance the feasibility study and business case for both waste to energy incineration and mixed waste processing. And that work is currently underway. This action also recommends a new technology for managing organic food waste. So once the city's current contract ends in 2030, which would see organic food waste converted into a renewable energy source. The first 3 objectives focused on actions that can directly influence the management of waste and the 5 levels of the waste management hierarchy. 9 actions within Objective 4 primarily focus on maximizing our operational advancements through innovation and through new technology to make our operations more efficient and less impactful on the environment. And they also support improving customer service and program accessibility. As these actions primarily speak to future planning and potential service enhancements, their impacts on waste diversion, reduction, and expanded landfill capacity are difficult to predict at this time, but will be assessed as these projects are further planned. And last but not least, Objective 5 looks to develop a zero waste culture across the city to align with council's vision for this waste plan and includes 2 action suites. One grounded in enhancing the city's investment in promotion and education efforts that better aligns with investments made by comparator municipalities, and another focusing on a circular economy strategy that aligns with provincial and federal policy and regulatory efforts. The premise of a circular economy is to transition away from the traditional take, make, dispose economic model to one where we recognize the value of waste as a resource. So this objective is also recommended. It recognizes that municipalities have strong influence over physical development of our city and the management of its assets and the procurement of public goods and services. And we as municipalities have access to a number of urban policy levers that can play a significant role to bring about change to the use and management of materials and resources in our cities. Next slide, please. In terms of key outcomes, the waste plan aims to create more opportunities to reuse or reduce, reuse, and recycle, resulting in increased landfill life, new programs that have been identified and recommended as priorities by residents and stakeholders, and provides improved customer service and enhanced operational efficiencies to ensure that the city will continue to deliver efficient and reliable service to our community in an affordable and fiscally responsible way. So over the 30-year term of the waste plan, recommended actions are expected to reduce waste by over 31,000 tons of waste, divert just under 1 million tons of waste from landfill, and extend the life of the landfill by 14 years, all of which aligns with provincial and federal regulatory and policy direction on promoting a circular economy. It provides additional time, as Isabel will walk through shortly, to build our reserve funds to save for larger capital investments, and buying time for council to determine the city's next residual waste management solution for when our landfill is full. Most of the short-term actions explained on the previous slide have the potential to immediately impact the amount of waste going to landfill and certainly provide lasting benefits over the term of the waste plan, including preserved capacity at the landfill, which in turn we've estimated will result in $120 million in deferred costs due to preserved landfill life. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, as Councillor Brockington had mentioned in his motion, methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas, is 25 times more potent than CO2 emissions and is one of the most significant greenhouse gases emitted from managing waste. And it's caused by decaying organic waste in landfill. Because methane is both a powerful GHG and short-lived compared to carbon dioxide, any increased diversion from landfill of organic material has an exponentially significant effect on reducing GHG emissions from the city's waste operations, ultimately aligning with council's climate change goals. The estimated reduction in GHG emissions from landfill resulting from the proposed waste reduction and diversion actions, as well as investment in generating renewable energy from the processing of organic food waste, is just over 9,000 tons of CO2 equivalent emissions per year. And this equates to removing just over 2,700 passenger vehicles off the road each and every year. Next slide, please. In the first 5 years of the plan, staff are recommending the focus be on implementing waste reduction, diversion, zero waste, and operational advancements, as well as undertaking feasibility studies and business cases for new technologies, of course, many of which are underway or recommended to start in the first 2 years. Implementing these actions early will immediately impact the amount of waste going to landfill, help keep waste management costs down, and buy us that additional time for council to make those decisions on what comes next once our landfill is full. Maintenance, regular program reviews, and enhancements of these actions will take place over the medium and long term. And then moving into the bottom of the slide, there are a number of critical decisions that are going to be required by this term of council. That includes on our next organics processing, technology, and facility, given our current contract ends in 2030, a new contract and approach for managing landfill gas and generating renewable energy, given our current contract ends in 2027, and feasibility study and business case for the city's next residual waste management solution. So these feasibility studies and business cases for these actions are taking place in the short term for implementation in the mid and long term. Next slide, please. So now that we've walked through the high-level overview of the waste plan, recommendation 2 of the staff report seeks council's direction for staff to immediately begin the planning and implementation for action suite scheduled for year 1 in the solid waste master plan, with an update on the implementation progress to be provided 12 months post-implementation. So 15 actions are proposed for planning and implementation in year 1, with an additional 8 actions to begin planning in year 1 for implementation in later years of the plan. Examples of action include enhancing diversion in our city facilities, enhancing investment in promotion and education, waste reduction actions such as expanding our offering of repair cafes in partnership with community organizations, developing a bulky waste strategy, implementing a citywide parks diversion program, and undertaking feasibility studies and business case for waste to energy incineration, mixed waste processing, and the anaerobic digestion of organic food waste. As Shelley had mentioned earlier in the presentation, there will be multiple touch points with council and members of the public throughout action planning and implementation to provide updates and to seek necessary approvals on critical decisions moving forward, including when new policies, strategies, and feasibility studies and business cases are developed. So every year, staff will present a progress report on the various initiatives that were approved for planning and implementation the year before. And we will also present the next year's work plan and seek council's approval to proceed with that work and the required funding that will align with the council approved long-range financial plan. Next slide, please. So Shelley had touched on briefly at the beginning of the presentation, engagement has certainly been fundamental throughout the solid waste master plan's development and will continue to be critical as actions are planned and implemented. Throughout the development of the waste plan, we had over 8,100 stakeholders and members of the public participate in engagement. And to ensure Ottawa's diversity is reflected in the waste plan, we've engaged with many diverse groups across the city and incorporated what we've learned in the solid waste master plan. So this has included groups that represents persons with disabilities, members of the SLGBTQIA+ groups, suburban, urban, and rural communities, Indigenous communities, older adults, women, youth, and newcomers. So recommendation 3 seeks council's receipt of the 3rd and final engagement series, What We Learned report. Our 3rd and final engagement series took place from February to March of this year, and we had over 520 participants that participated. And the purpose of the last and final engagement series was to share details of the final waste plan or the draft waste plan with residents and stakeholders, explain how previous engagement had been incorporated into the plan, and to receive feedback and gauge general support on the waste plan. So generally, participants reiterated priorities and feedback shared through earlier engagement sessions that were used to inform the recommendations in front of committee today. Participants reaffirmed the importance of prioritizing the 5 R's hierarchy, conscious of the fact that landfill space is quickly being depleted and that there will be the need for a new landfill or a residual waste management solution in the next 30 years. Participants generally supported landfill expansions, new technologies with a strong focus on energy, waste to energy incineration. And certainly the last common theme was that the waste plan is complicated and many were interested in learning more about the recommended actions and how they were prioritized for implementation. So what you're seeing in front of you today, there are no major fundamental changes compared to the draft waste plan that was tabled for council last November. What we did was based on the feedback we heard through our last engagement series is we added a lot more detail to help explain some of the areas that residents requested more details. And certainly any barriers and considerations and suggestions will be brought forward and documented as part of implementation planning. So I'll now pass the rest of the presentation over to Isabel to walk us through the proposed long-range financial plan.
Thank you, Nicole. I will now provide an overview of the solid waste long-range financial plan. Next slide. Je vais maintenant donner un aperçu du plan financier à long terme pour les déchets solides. The long-range financial plan is a companion report to the solid waste master plan and has been developed to provide committee and council with the assurance that based on the current projections, the solid waste master plan is affordable. Until now, solid waste has been funded from a variety of revenue sources without a long-term funding plan. The recent changes imposed by the province and the development of the solid waste master plan with clear action items has helped to clarify the short to medium-term investment requirements as a first step to establishing a longer-term funding plan for this service. Next slide. The long-range financial plan is exactly that. It's a plan to fund solid waste services over the long term that will evolve over time. The LRFP includes estimated costs for both operating and capital over the next 28 years to 2053. The first 10 years are more predictable, but the last 18 years are not, and include various assumptions that may change over time. The LRFP will evolve over time as new technologies are explored and council decides on the direction that should be taken. The financial implications of two options were assessed: a status quo scenario and a scenario where we implement the solid waste master plan's recommended actions. In both scenarios, there are costs that are regulatory requirements and are unavoidable regardless of which option council chooses. For the purposes of this initial long-range financial plan, we have included an assumption and very conservative cost estimates for a new landfill or residual waste management solution, but have not included the financial implications or estimates for a waste to energy or incineration solution for now. As I described the financial implications of status quo versus the solid waste master plan, you will clearly see the financial benefits of extending the life of the landfill, pushing the cost of a new landfill further out, and giving the city time to establish greater financial stability. Next slide. One of the key recommendations in this report is to move to a fully recoverable fee for solid waste services, similar to water and wastewater services. Currently, solid waste services are funded from both tax and fees and supplemented by other revenues. Waste diversion, which includes recyclables and organics, is funded from property taxes. For the average residential property valued at $415,000, that equates to $56 annually, plus the garbage fee of $145 for a total of $201. A property owner that has a home valued above the average would be paying more, and one valued less would be paying less for the exact same service. Also, business property taxes include a waste diversion component, even though they do not receive the service. It made sense to fund waste diversion from tax when it was first introduced, to recognize the fact that commercial businesses produce or contribute to recyclables. But with recent regulatory changes, with the move to individual producer responsibility, and the eventual loss of recyclables revenue in 2026, this is the right time to shift to more of a fee-based charge and away from tax funding. In 2023, the city began recovering the cost of collecting blue and black box material, so the only service that remains in the $56, that's tax-supported portion, in 2024 is for organics collection and processing. You will note that the solid waste charge remained at the same level from 2013 to 2019, which resulted in year-over-year deficits. We have been increasing the rate in the past 5 years to bring it more in line with the funding requirement. Solid waste services was also funded from other supplementary sources of revenue. The financial models assume the tipping fees will decline in 2025 in line with the solid waste master plan recommended action of no longer accepting waste from industrial and commercial clients. The city receives roughly $17 million annually from producers to recover the cost of collecting blue and black box materials. It is assumed that the city will no longer receive any revenue related to blue and black box materials by 2026, nor incur the cost to collect. The affordability model also included conservative estimated projections for other sources of revenue, including additional fees related to the sale of yellow bags and the sale of renewable natural gas. Next slide. As mentioned earlier, moving to a fully recoverable fee is more equitable, flexible, clearer, and more sustainable. This will align with the funding of solid waste services to more of a utility model similar to water services. Equity. Currently, 30% of the solid waste budget is funded by property tax and citywide revenues, which is paid by all property taxpayers in varying amounts depending on the value of their property. A fee would be charged only to users of the service and would be a flat fee. Flexibility. A fully recoverable fee can be better aligned to the overall service requirements, similar to a utility model that is self-funding on a 100% cost recovery basis. Clear. The cost of delivering solid waste services is much clearer and fees can be tied more directly to the service provided. And sustainability. Fee increases can be planned over a longer time horizon to provide smoother and more predictable fee changes and more predictable funding for the service. If council approves moving to a fully recoverable fee, the waste diversion charge would be eliminated from the tax bill. It would be added to the solid waste curbside service fee. If this were done in 2024, the fee would increase to $227 annually for the average $415,000 property assessment from the $201 to account for the loss of commercial property tax and other tax-supported allocations. That is an increase of $26 annually for the average residential property, or only $2 a month. For a home assessed 100,000 lower than the average, it would be $350 more per month, just $1.50 more. Next slide. This chart shows the City of Ottawa's charge for solid waste services in 2023 compared to other municipalities of comparable size across the country. Most are fully funded from either tax or rate, not both. Ottawa's charge is significantly lower than the city of a comparable size, and in most cases, those cities are limiting how much they are collecting. Ottawa collects more for a much lower charge, which is financially unsustainable. Next slide. So this chart provides an overview of the key financial assumptions that were built into each scenario, highlighting the key differences between status quo and the solid waste master plan. These costs are inflated and occur at different points in time in the affordability model. You can't add these numbers up to compare one to the other. Comparisons of total operating and capital costs over time for each scenario will be presented in the next slide. The first column highlights the regulatory requirements that were included in the financial model that are mandatory. They impose a cost that council has no choice but to accept over the next 10 years and related to the recommended actions over the next 28 years. There's also approximately $68 million in capital expenditures required just to maintain services and existing assets over those next 10 years. The solid waste master plan includes $71 million in service enhancements over and above the regulatory requirements to implement the recommended actions and extend the life of the landfill to 2050. The recommended actions also add an estimated $20 million in operating costs annually by 2031, as compared to an additional $15 million in debt servicing that would be required by 2033 based on a status quo scenario, where the new landfill is required by 2036. The new landfill or residual management systems estimated in the financial model are very conservative Class D estimates, including a 40% contingency. And the landfill implemented by 2050 is in inflated dollars compared to the landfill implemented sooner in 2036. Trail landfill closure costs have not been included in the estimates. There is a separate reserve to cover those costs, but it's important to note that those costs are incurred sooner if we maintain status quo. Estimated and projected costs for organics processing post-2030 have also been included in both scenarios. The status quo assumes continuing to contract out the service, and the solid waste master plan includes an anaerobic digester. Next slide. So this slide clearly demonstrates the minimal impact on annual operating costs of each scenario. The solid waste master plan adds $20 million annually, but the status quo requires an investment in new landfill much sooner, incurring debt servicing costs much sooner than for the solid waste master plan. It is the capital budget that is most impacted by status quo. The blue line shows the status quo investment required as soon as 2029 for a 2036 implementation, while the recommended actions of the solid waste master plan pushes that investment out much further. The cost is higher starting in 2047, but with the time value of money, they are not that far apart. Again, these are very rough Class D estimates shown in inflated dollars. The real differentiator between these two scenarios is demonstrated on this next slide. Next slide. So this slide shows the impact of each scenario on the solid waste reserve fund. As I mentioned earlier, the reserve fund has been in a negative position since 2013. With each budget over the past 5 years, we have been increasing fees to replenish the reserves slowly over time. Reserves are critical for financial sustainability, to smooth fluctuations in funding needs, to ensure predictability for ratepayers, and to put money aside for future investments. The status quo scenario would not only decimate the solid waste reserves, it would place it in a substantial deficit position that could take many years to recover and impact the city's overall liquidity and possibly our credit rating. The solid waste master plan, on the other hand, defers this significant investment, gives us time to explore other solutions and adjust as required over time, but more importantly, allows us to build up the necessary reserves to invest in whatever solution and new landfill requirements are required in the future. These models are based on a funding strategy that relies on a combination of cash and debt that is affordable. The only problem is that the status quo drains our cash and reduces our overall city reserves in order to do so. Status quo is not financially prudent or sustainable. Next slide. So this slide shows the impact of each scenario on the solid waste reserve fund. Sorry, the gray line on, the debt service limit. The gray line is the status quo scenario, and the orange line is the solid waste master plan. The financial models are developed to ensure that we never issue more debt than we can afford in terms of debt servicing annually. In order to make it affordable, we are recommending that the debt service level be increased to 15%, which is more aligned with the rate-supported services. Debt helps to smooth out and keep user fees down while ensuring that future generations are paying for the services that they will be benefiting from. Next slide. This slide is a summary of the estimated projected charge for an average single residential home over the next 10 years, and by comparison, the average multi-residential unit, which will continue to be charged less than a single residential home, more than 30% less. This is for information purposes only to show the possible increase in the charge and demonstrate that the annual fee for this critical and mandatory city service remains within very reasonable levels. The long-range financial plan that these charges are based on will be updated on a regular basis as new information becomes available and at least every 5 years as input to the asset management plans. Council is not approving these fees as part of the long-range financial plan. Fees will be set annually and approved by council as part of the budget process. The first line shows the projected status quo fee. In the status quo scenario, the fee would go up by 11% in 2025 just to meet the core operating and capital requirements and increase to 371 by 2034. If council approves the recommended actions of the solid waste master plan, the fee goes up by 17% in 2025 to fund some of the recommended actions. By 2034, the fee is just $10 more than what would be paid in status quo scenario. In comparison to status quo, the recommended actions only cost $13 more annually in 2025, or just $1 per month. The average increase in the status quo fee is 5%, and the average increase in the solid waste master plan fee is 5.4%. Staff recommend moving to a fully recoverable fee for solid waste services, but to also explore the feasibility of phasing in this fee as part of the 2025 budget exercise. Next slide. So implementing the solid waste master plan will increase the annual charge to ratepayers, but only slightly more than the increase required if the master plan was not implemented. For a marginally higher price, the recommended actions can be implemented, the life of the landfill can be extended, environmental benefits can be achieved, and financial sustainability can be reestablished for this essential service. Even with the increase in fees, Ottawa's solid waste fee would remain significantly lower than the other comparable municipalities. The black line is the projected Ottawa fees compared to other municipalities' rate projections if we inflated their rates by just 2% per year. Ottawa still remains the lowest. Next slide. So based on the results of the solid waste long-range financial plan, the recommendations to council are as follows: approve a funding plan that supports the solid waste master plan and recommended actions, implement a fully recoverable rate model as opposed to the current hybrid model to be phased in if required as part of the 2025 budget, establish a solid waste debt service limit of 15% similar to other rates supported services, and explore the feasibility of establishing a solid waste development charge as part of the next development charge background study. I will now hand it back to Alain to conclude the presentation.
Merci Isabelle, Shelley, and Nicole. So to conclude today's presentation, I want to remind members of committee, the media, and the public of what a critical juncture we're at right now when it comes to waste management at the City of Ottawa. À mesure que la population augmente et que la ville évolue, nous voulons nous assurer que vos services de gestion des déchets demeurent fiables et abordables, tout en évoluant pour répondre aux nouveaux besoins et défis. What residents can expect now and in the future is to pay a fair price for efficient, reliable waste collection services. And I think it's worth repeating that the city's landfill is quickly filling up. And in order to defer costly alternatives to managing waste, and whether that's a new technology or a new landfill, we need to make changes now. And to do this, we must work together. The more residents reduce their waste, use their green bins, ensure recycling is maximized, remembering that recycling is now a cost paid by the province, we will be able to make an impact on diversion levels and cost deferrals. And council can set the framework for doing so through these two reports. So thank you, Chair and members of committee. Understanding this is a lot of information to digest, we appreciate your time today. Un grand merci pour votre intérêt.
Thank you very much to staff and for the years of work to get to this critical juncture. I also want to thank committee and the councillors that have all taken in the presentation and briefings, technical briefs as we've gone through, as well as the solid waste sponsors group as well. They've provided really excellent advice and dialogue along with city staff. So councillors Gower, Johnson, councillors Kelly and Carr. Really appreciate the advice as we've moved along with this plan. So with that, I'm just going to ask if there's directions or motions early on to get on the floor. I have a small direction that I'll put on, but are there other directions or motions we want to get on now? Understanding some could come later. Okay, I'm not seeing any at the moment, but if some do come based on delegations or others, we're happy to take those. My direction to staff is that the solid waste master plan lists the development of a hazardous waste strategy to be planned in year 1 for implementation in year 2. The current household hazardous waste events are of a size and located primarily so they are accessible by vehicle traffic. Staff and solid waste services are directed to consider as part of the hazardous waste strategy development of the opportunity for smaller pedestrian accessible events or locations in the core to provide services to those residents that do not have access to an automobile. Staff are further directed to report back to council no later than Q1 2025 on the municipal hazardous waste, solid waste strategy. Well, thanks for drafting that and taking that direction. I know that those hazardous waste depots are really well received by residents in those areas and really well utilized. So thanks for your work in partnership on those programs. So with that, we're going to move to delegations now. So our first delegation is Kate Reiki with cafes. So Kate, I believe you're in the room here. You can come on up to the delegate spot just next to Mr. Gontier there. Got 5 minutes to address committee. Welcome.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me. I do have a slide presentation. There it is. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Right. So you may know about cafes. We're basically a very broad-based network of environmental leaders in Ottawa, and we represent the full gamut from urban, suburban, and rural communities. So many of your constituents are within our network cafes. So pleased to be with you here today. Next slide, please. So I want to congratulate the solid waste team really for coming to the end of this almost 5-year process. And cafes has really been engaged on the stakeholder sounding board for all of this time. And right from the beginning, together with Waste Watch Ottawa, we presented a series of 29 recommendations for the solid waste master plan. And so it's been fun to look back and see how many of those have been taken up. Over those last 5 years, we've been consistently pushing for prioritizing waste reduction and diversion as part of the overall plan. We've been trying to keep plastics out of the organic waste stream, user pay, kind of a way of financing solid waste that incentivizes people to reduce their waste, and also promoting lower cost, environmentally sustainable alternatives to incineration. Next slide, please. So in general, we have a few observations and questions and recommendations to put forward. I'm not seeing the time I have available. It was up at the beginning, but I just want to keep track of my time. Anyway, I'll continue.
You've got 3 minutes left.
Pardon? 3 minutes left. Okay. So in general, cafes is supportive of the solid waste master plan. We think it's going in the right direction. You know, all of the key bases are covered. And we're seeing more emphasis to waste reduction through reuse and diversion than we've ever seen before in Ottawa. So this is very, very, very valuable. The long-range financial plan, the inclusion of that is very useful because it really helps to see the bigger picture. We appreciate the metrics that have been chosen to follow the solid waste master plan over time, especially in tonnages rather than diversion of waste. I think those are very appropriate. Next slide, please. So really, if we have some concerns, and please take it in the spirit of trying to make a good plan even better. First of all, in the first two suites of not suites, but the first two objectives, the waste reduction and waste diversion objectives. We see that a lot of the actions that will begin right away are actually the development of strategies. So we're concerned that there's a lack of clarity at this stage in what will be accomplished and the timelines for rollout. The implementation plan gives some idea, but not really to the level of granularity that we would like, and it's the action descriptions are still sort of a lot of potential actions, but we don't see the clarity. So what we would like to see is expedited timelines for completing these strategies as soon as possible so we can get on to work.
Got 1 minute.
Pardon?
1 minute left.
Okay. Then I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go, can you just put it to the last slide, which really contains everything I want to say in the recommendations. So yes, as I mentioned, we would like to recommend expediting completion of all the strategies that relate to waste reduction and diversion by the end of 2024, by the end of this year, so that we can start implementation in early 2025. We'd also like to consider grouping a lot of these sub-strategies into one strategy. I think that will save time, money, and will support operational synergies among these elements. So, for example, there's the hazardous waste strategy that was referenced earlier in the direction. That's one of many strategies, and the circular economy strategy. There's a lot of overlap, and I think we could benefit from having them grouped together, and that might lead to consolidated action. The third one is to expedite action on waste depots. Waste depots really are very, very important as a mechanism of diverting waste in a comprehensive and accessible way. Yes, for hazardous
I'll
waste.
just ask you to read the last two out because you're out of time, unfortunately. So
Okay,
if you
I'm
just,
so sorry.
Without motivating on each one, just read the last two out if that's possible.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
We're asking to revisit the residual waste feasibility study terms of reference to ensure that the waste to energy option, which is one of the 5 options, includes the costs and siting arrangements for a new landfill and toxic waste facility. We want to ensure that the community partnerships that are contained in this plan are adequately resourced, both for city staff internally to manage the contracts, and also with stable long-term funding to organizations, including staffing and overhead costs.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All that research, that PowerPoint and those recommendations. It's very appreciated. I'm not seeing questions at the moment, but you being here is very helpful. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay.
Our next delegation up today is William Bangeast with Ecology Ottawa.
Oh, okay. I'm good to go. All right. I gather you can hear me all right too. Okay. Thanks. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you. I'm doing so on behalf of Ecology Ottawa. So we're here to to propose a grant program to reduce and divert Ottawa's waste through community partnerships. So actually an echo of the last point that the previous delegate mentioned. As it happens, reduction is the most effective way to deal with waste. And this is obvious. Whatever waste we don't produce, we don't need to deal with. It's the end of the road. The closest to zero waste we'll get. Diversion, whether through reuse or repair or any other approach, is similarly beneficial in that it eliminates the need for producing new goods and makes better use of what we have. It's for reasons of these, of course, that the draft solid waste master plan proposes as its first guiding principle, the prioritization of, quoting here, waste reduction, reuse, recycling, and recovery so that minimal residual waste is sent to landfill. And this is also why the first objective is to maximize the reduction and reuse of waste. Prioritizing reduction and diversion is popular among Ottawans. The second theme distilled from public feedback during the SWMP engagement process is that, quoting here, actions that support the higher tiers of the waste management hierarchy, reduction, reuse, and recycling should be a priority. Despite all this, the SWMP draft is a bit short on specifics when it comes to reduction and diversion. Thankfully, several Ottawa community organizations are already doing this work. I'm thinking of organizations like Eco-Equitable, which recovers fabric and sewing supplies for reuse and equips women immigrants with sewing skills. I'm thinking also of the Ottawa Tool Library, which helps people repair items to prolong their life. And I know, and you know as well, that that the city's partnered with the Tool Library for the repair cafes. I'm also thinking of the Ottawa Outdoor Gear Library, which lends equipment to help people enjoy the outdoors or helping with furniture, who provides a variety of household goods to people in distress, and the list goes on. These organizations are often operating on a shoestring and on the goodwill of countless passionate volunteers. And despite this precarity, they do excellent work. I'm sure you'll agree. Our point is that the infrastructure, social, institutional, already exists to achieve the SWMP's primary objectives. With proper funding, organizations like these that I've named could do their work with greater stability, reach, and impact. So we propose that the city create a multi-year grant program to fund organizations like these. We're proposing $1.5 million, which if, for example, spread over 3 years, would permit 10 organizations to receive $50,000 per year or 16 to receive $30,000 per year. I'll leave the math to you. While we understand that funds for waste management are tight, I'll point out again that reduction and diversion are the most effective methods of waste management and the best investment of these limited funds. It certainly pales in comparison to the over $500 million slated to replace the Trail Road landfill or even greater sums for incineration. But this also would be money that goes directly into the community. We're also, and importantly, I think, proposing that staffing, insurance, and rent be eligible expenses. Existing programs like SEPCHIP, while providing valuable funding for programs, don't cover these essentials. Again, organizations above all need stability to continue the excellent work they're doing. We, as it happens, launched a petition to this effect a week ago, and already 140 people have expressed their support for the proposal by signing it, and new supporters keep rolling in. Ottawans want these community groups to be empowered to do this important work. We therefore ask that you commit to a grant program to help these organizations continue this valuable work, if not increase it. This would be one of the best waste management investments that we could make. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your delegation. We have a question from Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. You can hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Thank you. Hey, William, I appreciate that delegation, and I certainly appreciate the desire to see the city possibly empower these groups. But I would like to know, before I would consider that kind of action, do you happen to know if these organizations, these various nonprofits that are focused on waste reduction at the community level, even if they don't have the kind of funding that you are seeking for them or advocating for them, do you happen to know whether or not they have been able or are able to track and monitor the success of their initiatives? The reason I ask that, I could certainly be motivated to see whether or not the city can empower those community groups to do that work. But before I could do that, I would want to be assured that these groups can measure the success quantifiably of their goals. So do you happen to know if they're doing this kind of work?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I don't happen to know offhand. It's not something that I've checked with them. I can't imagine that they wouldn't be open to that possibility. I think that's a reasonable thing to ask if funding is provided.
Thank you. All right, so I may then just speak to staff later on about whether or not they have any knowledge of these groups and whether or not these groups can or are providing some kind of data to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks very much for that question. And just, yeah, as a kind of a corollary to what Kate was also saying, I know staff are intending to make sure that there is this type of work taking place as part of the solid waste master plan and the long range financial plan. It's baked into what they're going to be doing with some of the grants. I expect some questions from councillors to staff on that point. But I understand they're planning for exactly what you've been speaking about.
Fantastic.
So appreciate the advocacy. If you'd like to respond.
Yeah, thank you. If I may, I want to underline the part about staffing and insurance and rent costs. I think that's often kind of overlooked. Often these grant programs are more for the implementation of the programs, and this, those other kind of basic costs are so fundamental to the operation. So again, just want to stress that aspect of our proposal.
That is appreciated. Thank you for your delegation. Our next delegation is Sevda Zaynali.
Hi there. Can everyone hear me?
We can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Sevda Zaynali, and I'm a fourth-year environmental engineering student at Carleton University. I'm here to urge you to enact regulations that mandate all food service businesses and large institutions, such as retirement homes and hospitals, to implement and maintain a comprehensive composting program. Ottawa has already demonstrated our community's work to reduce waste and promote environmental stewardship through initiatives such as the Ottawa City Council's approval of mandatory organics diversion program for all multi-residential properties in 2022, as we know. However, it's nowhere near enough, unfortunately. A far significant amount of food waste from businesses, such as food service, malls, and far more, continues to end up in landfills. I've seen this firsthand as I've been working part-time in the food service sector of a local retirement home for over 4 years now. When I first started there, I was in shock at just how much perfectly good food was thrown out, and even more shocked when I found out that it was in the garbage, thrown out in the garbage. And I thought, why would this still be allowed? I have a compost bin at home. Why doesn't this large establishment have a system in place? And that's when I realized that very few businesses would go out of their way to put in certain measures in place if legislation was not enforcing them to do so for the greater good of our wonderful community. That is where this thought of mine began, and I find myself here today addressing this council to enact said legislation and take action on the tons of food waste going into landfills. I attempted to find specific numbers for Ottawa from industry, but I was unable to do so. Please enlighten me if there are specifics. There's more specifics on residential, but 79% of potentially edible food loss and waste comes from manufacturing, processing, restaurants, hotels, retail in all of Canada, compared to residential, which accounts for only 21%, which is a wild difference. So according to the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, approximately 1/3 of all food produced globally is wasted. In Canada, this amounts to over 50 million metric tons of food waste annually, with a significant portion originating from businesses and institutions. Food waste in landfills produces methane, a greenhouse gas over 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide, as we went over earlier, over a 100-year period, accelerating climate change and posing severe environmental threats. The financial cost of food waste in Canada is estimated to be around $49 billion annually, according to the National Zero Waste Council. So to address this, I propose the following actions. Number one, mandatory compliance. Require businesses to separate organic waste from other trash and ensure its proper composting. Number two, accessible compost bins. So providing compost bins for customers to dispose of food waste and compostable items such as cutlery containers and things of that sort, both in kitchens and throughout the buildings. Infrastructure support, so offer support and resources to businesses for establishing composting facilities or partnerships with local composting services. Education and training, providing educational programs for staff and effective composting practices for them. And 5, monitoring and enforcement, so establishing a monitoring system to ensure compliance and implement penalties for non-compliance. And I know that some of these things are being considered and on their way to being enacted in the master plan. So we know that we are capable of these things, as we've seen the great benefits of the Green Bins in School program, of which I have personally reaped the benefits of while growing up attending school in the OCDSB myself. And the benefits of these measures are substantial. Composting converts food waste into valuable compost, enriching soil, supporting local agriculture, enhancing green spaces. Businesses can reduce waste disposal costs and potentially benefit from the sale of compost or reduced purchasing of soil amendments. Reducing food waste in landfills will significantly decrease methane emissions and contribute to Ottawa's climate action goals. Promoting sustainable waste practices supports a healthier community by reducing pollution and promoting environmental stewardship, and it would extend the life of the Trail Road landfill, which would cost, what, $500 million to replace? Huge project and expensive. So in conclusion, implementing mandatory composting programs in large institutions is a crucial step towards a more sustainable and environmentally responsible Ottawa. It would align with our city's green initiatives and sets a precedent for other municipalities to follow. I call on Ottawa to take immediate action and support this vital initiative for the betterment of our community and the environment. Thank you for the attention to this important matter.
Well, thank you very much for that well-timed delegation, and your message has been well received by councillors around this table. I know that there's several former school board trustees here that were with the Ottawa Carleton District School Board and have previously also engaged with other school boards in the city. We've got 4 of them, and several of them asked the exact question that you're asking to staff at a briefing session, technical brief. And the partnerships that we've got with school boards in Ottawa in particular. You're absolutely right that we need to do more to partner in that way, and that is a big form of institutional waste that we can improve upon with the green bins becoming more mandatory. We hope that the strategy we've got for multi-residential buildings works, as much as we hope that staff continue those partnerships with our school boards and other institutions to make sure we do exactly what you're advocating for. So thank you very much for your delegation today. It's very appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Our next delegation is Bill Brown. I believe it's the first of us.
Yes, my name is Bill Brown. I'm a longtime resident of Centertown. And I've come to talk to the committee today about a very small section of the issue of waste in Ottawa, but one that I feel has an outsized impact on the city. For some time, I've been concerned about the amount of our waste, paper, plastic, organics, and metal, that does not find its way to landfill or recycling or composting sites. I'm talking about the debris that ends up on our streets. I live downtown, so I can only speak to this area. And I have no charts or statistics, but my anecdotal evidence over many years suggests that the growing amount of debris on our streets is not only shocking, but there's little apparent effort to deal with it outside of spring cleanup and the odd drive-by of sweeping machines. My 43 years of living in Centertown have included both gardening and walking, lots of both. And both have me convinced that Ottawans are not the slobs that we appear to be. On our streets recycling day, there are open bins of plastic, paper, cardboard that get tipped over, blown over, their contents pawed through and ripped out by the wind. And there appears little place to deal with the resulting mess. Or in an apartment building such as mine, where I've been gardening along Metcalf for decades, garbage and recycling are picked up in large bins which get hauled out into the street, mechanically raised, and then slammed into the back of a truck. Every garbage or recycling day leaves me to clean up the mess of plastic and paper that ends up either on the street or in my garden. Similarly, it appears that smokers don't consider their butts as litter. With indoor smoking forbidden, our sidewalks have become the new ashtrays, with butts remaining wedged in cracks and seams that sweeping machines don't get at. But there do appear to be simple solutions. The last time I was in Montreal, it happened to be pickup day for things waste. I'd already noticed virtually no debris on the streets or caught in the fences and bushes. But that day, I also noticed that their garbage, composting, and recycling containers are all closed. They have lids. European cities have work crews with brooms and bins and vacuums. Turin, Italy, even has a crew that goes along and deals with the dog urine on buildings. So even by the lowest standards, apart from Ottawa's well-kept federal lands, our streets and sidewalks are an embarrassment. Everyone I speak to is dismayed at this easily solved problem. I recommend that our new waste management plan include what to do with waste that doesn't make it to its intended destination, but instead ends up curbside on our streets, tangled in our fences and brushes, in our parks, yards, and gardens, and puddling on our sidewalks. Most Ottawans may have become inured to this sorry state, but I'm not one of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your delegations. I'm not seeing questions at this time, but appreciate you being here. Our next and last delegation on this item, the Solid Waste Master Plan, is James Scott McKillop.
Good morning. I believe I had some slides, did they? You have the slides there that I provided?
We'll just double check here to see if someone come in. Doesn't look like we've got them here, fortunately.
Doesn't look like you got them. I sent them, you answered that email. I provided some slides here today that I know received through an email I sent you in a Google document, but anyways, I'll move on. So good morning. Thanks for having me here today. I'm here on behalf of an ethics committee that is very concerned regarding several issues of the Ottawa Smart City. Now, I looked over your solid waste master plan, and I have some serious issues in regard to the concerns of these waste reduction technologies, especially in regards to the anaerobic digestion and the wastewater energy transfer systems. According to the National Research Council, who I know you're dealing with on the matter, seem to believe these anaerobic digestion is involved with the production of food tech using advanced materials and nanotechnology. Now, many Ottawa residents are very concerned in regards to ingesting these advanced nanomaterials. I can't find any data proving they're safe, but unfortunately I can find lots of data proving they're involved in human augmentation technologies. I'd love to be wrong regarding my claims, but unfortunately the National Research Council and standards organizations involved agree with me. Now, the National Research Council also claimed that these wastewater technologies also include WBE nano biosensors for environmental monitoring. With the Internet of Things and municipal wastewater and drinking water. In my opinion, something sacred as water was never meant to be added to advanced nanomaterials added to it and the internet. Unfortunately, our government, the National Research Council, Francois Collier, SCC Governing Council member and member of the IEC, IEEE, ISO, feels otherwise. Francois is responsible for the standardization of the Internet of Things and digital twins, but more importantly, bio-digital convergence and the electrotechnical issues in your master plan. According to Francois, both the food nanotechnologies and the wastewater-based epidemiology and wastewater energy transfer system is involved in human augmentation, including monitoring us with graphene nanotechnology, which is one of the other underlying technologies of your solid waste master plan. I'm under the assumption that this committee is unaware of how these technologies are converging and are really being used. I ask that you take a closer look at what you're recommending with these systems, which all seem to go unnoticed in the Ottawa smart city. If you don't want to be augmented by Francois Collier or any of the biodigital convergence and circular economy crew that go, water is essential. Our food and water should be sacred. It's essential for all living organisms. Water should be free, especially free of nanomaterials involved in human augmentation. Water is life. And your wastewater plans with your solid waste plans and your electrical plans, whether it's the Green Fleet strategy or your solid waste master plan, or what Randall Roger and his digital twin technologies, should be looked at more closely by this council. And I would greatly appreciate if you would do so. Now, I left you some slides today, and I left you several links in that email that all come from the standards organizations, the National Research Council, and the Government of Canada. I would highly, highly suggest that you look over these technologies before issuing them any further. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your delegation. Now, just if in the future, if you've sent correspondence, just indicate that you want something up there as a PowerPoint, because I think we've reviewed it and that it wasn't indicated there. It was just a regular correspondence. So if you do want a PowerPoint up there, happy to put it up there. We always do when people request it, but it has to be just requested and sent. So thank you. Thank you for being here. You are our last delegation, and I'm not seeing any questions. So we're going to move on now to councillor comments and questions of staff. So first, okay. Well, first up is Vice Chair Carr, and then we're moving on to Councillor Curry, Luloff, and Devine. Vice Chair.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I tried not to get my hand up first, but I just have a few questions, and I think there's been a lot of really good work that has been done with respect to the solid waste plan. I guess my first question would be quite simple. The gentleman that spoke about the fact that our recycle bins are open, my understanding is that we'll be able to look at a different collection contract, perhaps on a cart-based system, which a closed lid, that post 2031, if you can just confirm that for me.
So through you, Chair, just a reminder that the Blue Box program is now under the province, and we will be advocating when the province fully transitions in 2026 to encourage lids for our carts.
Okay, thanks. 2026 it is. Okay, thank you for that. There's a lot of great things in the solid waste management plan, and I guess just one of my concerns, I think it's, I heard the gentleman from Ecology Ottawa speak about the grant program, and I know that we've included a small amount in the solid waste master plan, $350,000 to look at initiatives such as this and including repair cafes. One thing that continues to concern me, and I know Ecology Ottawa spoke about it, is the lack of plans to consolidate where we can do these diversion drop-offs. I know Ottawa's a very large city, it's 2,800 square kilometers. But when I look at where, to take things to a repair cafe, to go to a hazardous waste depot, to call a furniture, like a philanthropic organization that collects furniture, it's not, there's no easy way for me to take everything I need to reuse or recycle and drop it off anywhere. And within the documents, it spoke about the fact that potentially at city facilities that there would be places that could better sort like the scrap metal and these sort of things, but it would not be open to the public. Is there any way that there can be any sort of consideration for being able to have more of a one-stop shop? I know other cities have done it, and I will use the example of Edmonton because I know it well, you know, where you can drop off your tires, you can drop off your bulky furniture, you can drop off your batteries, you can drop off all that, and some things have a fee and some don't. Is there any way that this sort of eco-station approach could be contemplated?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So in a nutshell, yes. Now, one of the things you will see is one of the recommendations that was recommended for bringing forward as part of the solid waste master plan refresh in 5 years' time is those more permanent base depot style events. The challenge with where we are at, first and foremost, with the transition to individual producer responsibility, while tires, electronics, have transitioned to individual producer responsibility. There's still some issues that are being ironed out at the provincial level. So our intent is, as we are identifying new items, such as bulky items, such as enhancing hazardous waste over the next few years, identifying those new end markets, we'll be in a position to be able to bring that back, but also having discussions with producer-based organizations on the potential to partner with those types of facilities. And one thing I'll mention as well is hearing your feedback, pardon me, in terms of the waste reduction and reuse events too. And I think that's certainly staff's intent is to look at some of those one-stop shop opportunities, but also making sure that there's access across the entire city to those different types of events.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll let you go to the next.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Councillor Curry.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a couple of quick questions, comments. One, first of all, I think I've seen in Canada, people just have this netting they put over their blue boxes when it's windy and it clips on. It seems to work. Anyway, the next thing I was going to say is the action item 43 is very specifically about innovation and technology strategy. And I was just wondering, what is that actually going to look like when you engage with all these various groups?
Yeah, it's a great question, Councillor. So the intent with that one, I think it was originally Councillor's desire, recognizing that there's lots of opportunities for innovation, not just necessarily the residual waste management. So as part of early engagement, we did have some earlier conversations with Invest Ottawa as an example, recognizing that we have a very prominent green tech sector. So the intent of this strategy would be working on how can we potentially infuse more innovative opportunities, working to support local economic development. And examples could even be from promotion and education, looking at new opportunities such as gamification as an example. So there's, even tapping into some of the testing and some of the piloting for automated collection. So different opportunities. So that will be something that as part of the development of the strategy and seeking council's guidance on core areas of focus, but that's kind of at a high level, some of the intent with that strategy.
Okay, thank you for that. I read in the report about these sensors that could go on garbage cans and all the rest of it, right? And I would say a lot of that technology is actually in the Canada North Tech Park. And so we have a special economic district and we have a plan, in case you didn't know about this, I just wanted to let you people know that there is a special economic district in Canada and the other one is the airport. And there is to be a plan, a very specific plan for how you engage those two special economic districts. And in the tech park, there's actually a living lab where they, you can, in real life with real people, test out a lot of this stuff. So I just want to make sure, because it's not mentioned in the report, there's always Invest Ottawa, but there's never where the technology is actually sitting. So that was one point I wanted to make in a slightly non-obnoxious way. I don't know if I actually achieved that. But then the other thing I was going to say was the technology that I've recently read about, where to extend the life of a landfill, you take the leachate and you recirculate it so that, this is a technical term, but all the poisonous guck then eats all the other guck and you get less guck or more concentrated guck. And so I wondered if that is actually something we are looking at as well.
I just have to comment. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. You probably explained that in such a better way than we would do from a technical standpoint. So that's actually something that we do today as part of our landfill operations. It's to help with the settling of waste, the further breaking down of that organic material, and that also contributes to the biogas generation with our electricity generation.
Great, because I had asked this question in another briefing and had indicated that they take some of that leachate and we send it out to RO Pickford. So that's why I thought we didn't do it. I thought we used that because we need it elsewhere, but we do it in both places. Is that what I understand? Yes.
That's correct, Councillor.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Craig. Councillor Luloff.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. Is anything being considered to address the concern that we're hearing about residual garbage being left behind after pickup?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? It's just hard to hear you, Councillor.
Oh, sorry about that. Is anything being considered to address this concern that we're hearing about residual garbage being left behind after pickup?
Thank you for the question. So as it stands today, there is a responsibility of the collector to basically clean up after themselves. And if we find that there are instances that this doesn't take place, we will be working with them in order to either issue a liquidated damage if we have to go and do that cleanup ourselves. Residents tend to send a service request in order to let us know when there's a larger accumulation of waste that we will go in action.
And I suppose it's the same response because I've also heard concerns about liquid waste spilling from our trucks after green bins are picked up. It's quite awful, and that's being looked at as well through the same line.
Yes, right now there are instances where we have our leakage coming from our trucks, whether it be fuel or garbage juice or organics juice. And yes, reaching out to solid waste in order to request a street sweeping in order to clean up when those instances do take place.
Okay, great. Is that an issue just with like the age of the trucks, or is this a whole other issue altogether?
You're correct, Councillor. It is a function of the age of trucks. So considering the initial contract was let in 2011, and then there were a number of extensions, and then we have secured a new contract starting in 2026. So we are working with our vendor to try to minimize those instances while they try to balance the costs for new vehicles. But we look forward to onboarding new vehicles when they start in 2026.
Okay, awesome. I'm really pleased to hear about the work that you're doing with producers. You know, many people find it difficult to reduce non-recyclable waste when producers are using non-recyclable plastics on foodstuffs and whatnot. How are those discussions going, and who are they involving?
So our team works very closely with, as part of a number of different organizations. First, the Municipal 3Rs Collaborative, which has the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and a number of different municipalities around the table that work closely with producers on the transition to individual producer responsibility, but also with the provincial government as we iron out and work through some of those issues.
Do you think is that going to line up with the institution of the new solid waste master plan? Do you think that the discussions are going well enough that it'll all kind of come together at the same time?
I'm sorry, Councillor, can you clarify your question? I'm not sure I understand.
Sure. I mean, it would be good to have those sort of producer responsibility regulations in place once this new solid waste master plan is rolled out. And I'm wondering if staff is anticipating that these discussions will, these concurrent discussions will come to fruition about the same time as we institute the new solid waste master plan.
Understood. Thank you, Councillor.
No problem.
So first and foremost, we do have a number of provincial-based programs that have already transitioned to individual producer responsibility. So tires, batteries, and electronic equipment, and hazardous waste. Now, we continue to have some challenges with hazardous waste, which is something we're actively working with the province on. And of course, then there's the transition to individual producer responsibility for the blue and black box programs across the province, which will be in place across the entire province by 2026. And then we anticipate at that point, the province has also indicated a number of different other areas of focus in the future. Right now, they're very preoccupied with the transition of the Blue Box program because it is quite significant. But other opportunities that they've talked about and hinted at include textile waste and mattresses as examples for kind of the next level that they'd like to target from an individual producer responsibility regime.
Yeah, I feel like that including the disposal cost within the cost of a mattress, kind of paying it forward that way might make sense. So I'm glad to hear that those discussions are happening as well. Can I ask how the plastic and the green bins program is working? I've heard some anecdotes that many people are not interested in purchasing or acquiring the compost from this because they're worried about things like microplastics. Is that something that that you're hearing, or is that the program generally working quite well?
I would say, Councillor, first and foremost, we did report back to Council, I think it was about 2 years ago, on some of the early insights into the effectiveness of that program. So right off the bat, within the first year and a half, we did see a 3% increase in waste diversion by introducing the use of plastic bags as liners, but also allowing dog waste. And that aligned with the original projections of what we believed would happen in introducing that. And we've also, our current organics processing contractor, they do have to meet provincial requirements when it comes to the amount of contamination within the waste stream. So there have not been instances where they've gone above or they have not exceeded provincial requirements when it comes to any of that plastic material.
Awesome. Thanks for the update 2 years in. Would staff take direction to expedite the investigation of long-range cost-benefit analysis of a waste energy facility, or is this work already underway and is Q1 2025 the soonest that we can receive this information? Yeah, I'm concerned a little bit with the construction inflation, and that the longer that we wait to make a decision one way or another, the more expensive any option will become.
Thank you for the question. And so staff, as you know, based on the direction provided at council last December, we're working towards completing the pre-feasibility and business case study, and the intent is to bring that back to council Q2 2025. I think it's important that this work, the time that we have identified is the time required in order to ensure that we're bringing back a fulsome technical analysis, so that way council is positioned best to make a decision.
So there's no option to expedite that work. You've got to go through your due diligence, and that's the soonest that we can get that information.
That is correct. And also in coming up with the overall timeline, we have expedited by 6 months. So all of those considerations have already been incorporated into the time and the schedule that we've provided to you.
Okay, great. Truly appreciate your work. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. I have a bunch of questions, so I'll try to go as quickly as possible. But thank you very much, and commendations to staff. I know this is a big day for you all and really for the city of Ottawa, so thank you very much for this fantastic plan. My first question, with regards to 25 action suites, and forgive me if this was already communicated, but are there clear timelines set for the launch and expected delivery or accomplishment of each of those actions in that list?
So, Councillor, within the draft solid waste master plan, that was, I believe it's supplemental document 1 to the solid waste master plan, it does include a lot more detailed overview of the implementation timeline for each of the actions.
Perfect, thank you. Under objective 4 for action suite 17, where you're going to pilot a pilot project for an alternative collection container, I believe we discussed this before, but does that within alternative collection containers, are we talking about the exploration of a possible cart subscription system?
That's correct, Councillor. In that particular action suite 2, I think there's a couple of other things to note. There are some innovative technologies available on the market, such as solar compaction for on-street to help us reduce the frequency in terms of when we need to do collections. So all about operational enhancements. So looking further at those opportunities. But also another important one, as you'll recall from the debates and discussion with the 3-item implementation plan tabled at committee last month. We know we anticipate some challenges in common pad areas. So this is also an opportunity for us to look at potentially piloting different bin type solutions where our current bins today don't necessarily make sense. And this is also about looking at different, more accessible, more convenient solutions for residents beyond kind of our product offerings today.
Thank you. I appreciate that there's a breadth of alternatives that action will pursue. But just sticking with the idea of the cart subscription system, what I'm looking to find out, because I know that we have discussed this before, some cities have a cart subscription system where, depending on the size of your family, you can buy small, medium, large. So I'm assuming that may be one of the pilots that the city will explore. And I suppose my question is, if we were to explore and consider that as an alternative, may I assume that the implementation of that would kind of throw a wrinkle into the current long-range financial plan for a uniform rate for every household? Because we would just, if you go in that system, you would effectively have different levels of service also.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So my apologies. So Action Suite 42 includes the action for automated cart collection for curbside households. And that's where we'll look at those opportunities to transition. It's a more longer term solution. So with the next collection contract, but you're absolutely correct. It does, especially with the transition that's being recommended as part of the long range financial plan to a rate-based model, that would allow flexibility as we're looking at this option further, potentially implement a system similar to Toronto or Edmonton where you have that variable rate-based system.
Okay. My next question, so I heard comments about how our current plan would extend trail landfill by X number of years. I'm not sure if it was an additional 5 years or an additional 14 years. No matter what the number is, it's projecting a further extension of the capacity of trail. And my question is, knowing that our next generation solution, whether it be a new landfill or be a waste to energy transfer, knowing that we are tying the implementation of that next solution to the timeline for trail, if we are projecting that trail can be extended longer and longer, do we have viable monitoring systems in place so that every few number of years we can accurately determine whether or not we are, meeting that extension? Because if we fail by a few years, and if the next generation is tied to that timeline, then we might be in trouble.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So there are a couple of avenues that we currently have. So as part of our compliance requirements with the Ministry of Conservation, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, we're required annually to submit an annual monitoring report. And with that report, we identify, we provide a forecast on when we expect trail to close. So that is done annually, and that's a requirement with the province. In addition, as mentioned through the presentation, there will be annual updates that are provided to Council, providing insight regarding our successes on implementation. So we'll be able to comment on updates on our waste audit, so the composition of what materials are found in the garbage, as well as some of the tonnage changes and successes of some of our promotion and education requirements, so that we can help to be demonstrating that we're sending less material to trail. So with that information, in addition to the annual monitoring report information, we will be able to keep Council up to date on how we're doing and whether or not the next decision for a residual waste strategy is required.
Thank you. I noticed in the long-range financial plan, there was a bullet point that said that the LRFP does not include estimates for a waste-to-energy transfer station, but assumes the cost for a new landfill. Can I assume that the reason the plan is currently based on that it doesn't currently project the cost for a new waste-to-energy transfer is simply because we don't yet have a reliable estimate for that? And it's not because we're not leaning in any direction, it's just because we don't have the estimate yet?
Councillor, it is hard to hear you because you're kind of going in and out. I'll just recommend at home maybe putting in like some headphones with a mic, because I don't know if it's the room you're in, but every time you're in that room, I find it's echoey on the Zoom. So I didn't quite capture all of what you had asked there. Could you be more succinct in what you were asking?
Yeah, sorry about that. My question is the reason that the LRFP does not include estimates for a waste-to-energy transfer, but assumes cost for a new landfill, is that because we simply don't have a reliable estimate for the cost of the new WDT?
The answer to that is yes. That's my understanding. Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry about the sound, because I wasn't aware of that. I apologize. So I'm not sure if this next question will even be heard. So Mr. Gaultier made reference to the fact that we are paying a fair price for our waste management. And I noticed on the slide that we are on the low end of how much residents pay in cities across Canada. Earlier in the presentation, there was reference to the fact that because of how we were charging residents, that we lost many of our reserves, and even the fact that our credit rating was impacted. So my question is, Mr. Gontier, you were saying that we will now be paying a fair price. Can I get assurance from staff that with the marginal, it's not an extreme increase to the rate that was going to be charged to residents, are we putting ourselves in a position where we are in fact we are eliminating any threat to our reserves, we are eliminating any further threat to these costs impacting our credit rating?
So I can start. I can say, and it was in the presentation, that the next 10 years are much more well-known than the next 18 years after that. So we have a very solid, but there's still estimates of the next 10 years. And then after that, there are assumptions. And as technology changes, as we make decisions, we will evolve this plan. This plan isn't a 28 years set in stone plan. It will evolve over time.
Thank you. And Isabel, I know that I'm going to be speaking to you about some clear differentials on the impact on residents of various property values, and I'll be bringing that information perhaps to council. My last question to staff, could you respond to the delegation, Sevda Zaynali, who was speaking about the possibility of mandating composting with businesses? It was an excellent presentation for really good point.
Certainly, Councillor. So I think first and foremost, just noting that I think the food businesses, but there was also mention of retail establishments. So those are all regulated by the province of Ontario as part of the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector. So as a municipality, very limited regulatory tools available to us to influence that. I think important to note that there is a provincial policy direction under the organics policy statement under the Circular Economy Act that does set forth provisions for enhanced organics diversion within those retail sectors. I'm not sure if Legal Services wants to add anything further to that. I'm seeing a nod no.
Okay, Councillor, that's the end of your question time. Thank you for those questions. You can get back on the list if there's other ones. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to staff for this extensive report and your years of work on this. I'm curious to know what you're going to do with your time once we pass this, but thank you for your presentation. It's good to know also there's a tech park in North Canada. I'm happy to hear that. I do listen, Councillor Curry, so thank you. We do need to expand the Alexander Community Center, so I want to plug that even though this is the wrong committee. Okay, so here's my opening statement. As long as reducing waste and diverting waste is voluntary, we will never achieve the targets that we want to achieve. And I think that we really do need the federal government and or the provincial government say, you know what, we need, and I know the federal government's talked about, vehicles sold in Canada at some point will be not depend on fossil fuels, but unless we make recycling mandatory, unless we make organic waste mandatory, and we make it frankly illegal for people and businesses, the ICI is a huge industries, 3 industries that are not doing their part. If we give people the option, then waste will continue to go into the landfill over and over again. And it's really at the end of the day about amending behavior. People are used to throwing things in the garbage. They don't see it after the garbage truck picks it up. They don't care about what happens. But again, I don't want future generations and future councils to be saddled with a major decision and having to spend, frankly, an excessive amount of money to create a new landfill or an incineration plant. When I speak with children when they're very young up to high school age, we talk about the very ancient practice when this city was first created 200 years ago of two men likely on a horse-drawn cart taking garbage out to the periphery of a community where there was a big hole, and they threw the garbage there and they came back and they repeated it. And we're doing that 200 years later, and the only thing different is there's a truck. That's how we're dealing with garbage. And I challenge them to think of ways to deal with our garbage crisis, because it really is a crisis. And to spend what will likely be close to $1 billion for a new facility to send our garbage to me is very prehistoric ways to deal with garbage. So I really do believe that we have, I mean, the next chapter here is making recycling and green bin organic use mandatory. It has to happen because I just can't see people volunteering on a volunteer basis to do that. So that was just my opening thoughts. I've got sort of a mishmash of questions all over the place. Festival and special events in Ottawa have pushed back pre-COVID, where I was trying to work with the number of festivals in my ward in particular on using biodegradable packaging and materials. We seem to have made some progress here, but can you just walk me through your work with the festival and special event communities in Ottawa and how you're encouraging them to be more environmentally sensitive with their packaging and that type of waste?
Certainly. Thank you, Councillor. Maybe I'll start first with the special events action team. There are a number of different guides and tools that they already provide, and it's more of encouraging festival goers. There are certain, not festival goers, pardon me, festival organizers. There's certainly a number of festivals in Ottawa that have really are quite leaders when it comes to sustainable waste management. But the intent here as part of this one action is to continue that work with that team. Right now, they are actively engaging as part of the special events bylaw review with that sector, and we're working closely with that team in terms of opportunities to do things differently when it comes to sustainable waste management. So we'll be looking at more of a graduated approach with this, which is enhancing some of those different tools and resources available. But the council certainly does have legislative levers as under the authority under the Municipal Act as part of the special events permitting process to mandate requirements for more sustainable waste management. So we're starting right now with that engagement, not quite yet on the mandatory, but really trying to support better than we have historically.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Given the number of special events in my ward, certainly in tune with the good and festivals that need to improve. But it's not just waste management; it's promoting public transit use and how they promote and advertise public transit use, less bicycle availability, bicycle parking, on-site water refill stations, all of these things. Which, if you're going to have an event on city property in Mooney's Bay by a certain date, you must meet these expectations in order to get a permit. So that's okay. Okay, collection of recyclable material on city property at city facilities. I have a suspicion, at least in one that I visit frequently, it's collected and then thrown in the garbage. So if we have recycling stations in city facilities, is there a 100% guarantee that we are collecting that material and it is getting recycled? Because at these facilities, I don't see bins for recycled matter. I don't see bins for organic matter. So where is it going once it's collected within the city facility?
Thank you for the question. So currently with our multi-residential contractor, they do collect from city facilities. So similar to the multi-res properties, there's organic streams, recycling streams, as well as waste streams. But what we can do is circle back with our partners in recreation and culture in particular in order to provide greater certainty or assurances of that.
Thank you for that. With respect to hazardous waste depots, which I'm a huge supporter and fan of, we have been criticized in the past for the locations of our depots not being centrally located, at least one of them. And for people who are, I wouldn't say homebound or housebound, but not able to amass their hazardous materials and get to a depot. Maybe they don't have a car, maybe they just have too much material. if I were to call 311 or reach your unit, how do you facilitate people who are in this particular situation?
So thank you for the question. So in part, as Nicole mentioned, there are a number of programs that have already transitioned to individual producer responsibility, as well as outlets throughout Ottawa that accept those materials outside of our events. So one thing that we are trying to do, and usually those locations are within the community, within walking distance, and recognizing though it's not all products available at one's doorstep. So it's really trying to ensure that information on Waste Explorer, if you enter that product in with your address, it identifies locations close by that may be able to be at that take it back. So it's really ensuring that residents have access and check those opportunities first. And as Nicole mentioned, as part of the strategy review that will be taking place for the household hazardous waste, it is looking then for those opportunities of how are we able to put together possibly some smaller events that may be able to be peppered in different areas of our city, which then may be able to provide another option. So that would be part of the strategy that will come back for committee and council next year.
This is a minor point and maybe contradicts the theme.
So you are over time.
Okay.
So if you want to just quickly finish up, that'd be great.
I still have a few, but I'll squeeze in one more, and that is the placement of garbage bins. Maybe this is for the general manager, but I have had some challenges over the years where there is proven demand for the placement of a garbage bin, where nobody seems to want to facilitate a location for a garbage bin. High pedestrian area, garbage or bus stops nearby, garbage accumulates, and neither OCH or OC Transpo or the city or even private property owners are willing to yield space for bins. Can someone speak to sort of this particular challenge, and how can we make some inroads on this in particular?
Thank you, Councillor. Recognizing it, and one of the delegates also was speaking to the presence of material that is in and around our city. So one of the pieces that we will be looking at is a litter strategy. So recognizing now there are requirements of when and where garbage bins are placed. And so it may be an opportunity for us to revisit that and bring that strategy back for council's consideration.
Thank you for that, Councillor. If there are questions, you can jump back on the list. Good set of questions there. Councillor Kavanaugh, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the whole team, Alain, and the entire management team for this. We're going in the right direction, and I appreciate the delegations who've also given that indication about reduction. Reduction is key, and I appreciate that that's what we're doing. Just to go on record, we need to do that long before we consider burning garbage, if we ever do that. So I appreciate that that's what we're thinking about. One of the comments about open bins versus lids, that actually has been a factor in parks. I asked for covers on bins in Britannia, for example, because of seagulls. It's not just wind, it's animals, and really bad and messy. So can that be a policy? That's part of, we also, of course, want recycling stations in parks as well. But can that be considered? Because I find that was very helpful.
Thank you for that feedback, and certainly we will take that back in order to ensure that when we do place a bin, the consideration of whether it's covered or not.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments that were raised on food waste, especially at the commercial level. And I realize that we can't have control over that, but do we have campaigns to reach out to schools to talk more about that? Because that's obviously the best place to raised that issue, and I appreciate the delegation on that Ms. Zaynali brought forward. As is mentioned, many of us are school board trustees, and we've heard this loud and clear from students before.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So certainly something our existing education assistants do focus when possible within our existing resource capacity. They are participating and providing outreach within schools. But we've recently started more detailed conversations with the various school boards on opportunities to further enhance even curriculum or learning. So very early discussions, but something that will be ongoing and continue to be a priority, especially given we've heard loud and clear from council that this is an area of importance when it comes to our promotion and education, educating individuals when you're young, right? That's where you establish those good habits. So absolutely.
Get on while you're young. Thank you. Construction waste. It makes up roughly about 27% of waste, I understand. And we get a lot of questions about it, especially because of infill and demolitions. I know it's provincially regulated, and the building code is what needs to be updated, and the province isn't quite there yet. Could staff speak to how the green building policy for construction of our own corporate buildings is showing a good example when we talk about the solid waste master plan?
Certainly, Councillor. So just giving some examples in terms of the green building policy. So there are provisions included in that for when developing our own facilities to look at waste reduction, reuse. I think one of the other areas, opportunity for influence, of course, through the high performance development standards, which I understand the implementation plan is still to be come back to council, but as part of tier 2 requirements, there were some requirements included in there in terms of enhancing waste reduction and diversion. And our colleagues in infrastructure services are also looking at updating some of their standards for infrastructure projects as well.
Thank you. One glaring omission was the LRT, because we're looking at demolishing things like Lincoln Field Station, and there's no plan for any kind of recycling or reusing. This is a P3, and is that something we can do in the future to make sure that we write that into P3s? Because I've been asked many times what's happening, when they demolish that old station and they've got a brand new station. Is that something we can consider?
Councillor, thank you for the question. Let me follow up with legal services and procurement offline, and I will commit to get back to you on that.
I appreciate it. It's just, we stare at it every day, so I appreciate it. In terms of asphalt, I understand it can be recycled?
Yes, Councillor.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, because of course that's being torn up every day, and so I just want to know what our policy is on that. Is that a requirement that whenever we tear up road, that asphalt is recycled?
Thank you, Councillor. So I know I do have some responses from our colleagues in infrastructure services. I apologize, I don't have it in front of me, but I know we do have certain standards that meet regulatory requirements in terms of recycled content in our asphalt. And there are some different provisions depending on the type of actual roadway.
Thank you. And in terms of any kind of waste diversion, expansion of repair, cafes, etc., I know most of us are happy, as councillors, happy to host these things, and any kind of diversions that we can. Councillor Brockington talked about it as well. But can there be any outreach to, help us do it in our wards? That's one of the issues, of course, is distance. People who just can't get there, but they want to be part of this, and they may be biking there, they may be walking there. Is it possible to expand it, and can we have councillors host these events?
Thank you, Councillor. So one of the priority actions in the waste plan that is being recommended includes expanding repair cafes investments in working with community partners. So we've recently in past years, this year we are hosting 4 across the city. So upon council's approval, we'd be looking to expand that across the city and looking at more locations for just those reasons to increase accessibility. And we can certainly look at opportunities such as partnering with colleagues at OC Transpo to see if there's opportunities with Paratranspo, again, just to ensure accessibility, and certainly something we'd be looking to work with as we're scheduling and planning over the next year, working with members of council in your offices on determining those locations and helping support those events as well and promoting them.
I just have time for one more question. Has the city considered the recycling of large items that may be considered construction waste, but sinks and fridges and furniture? And I understand that this is something that Edmonton has for a reuse center. Is this something that we can do as well?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So some of those examples that you just mentioned, we currently don't accept as part of our programs. But with one of the recommendation on the bulky waste reduction reuse strategy, that's something certainly we'll scope into looking more broadly at opportunities to try to reduce those bulky materials. We have about 12% of the waste stream is bulky material. So recognizing some of what goes to landfill can be reused, can be repurposed. So that action suite is all about further exploring those opportunities.
And perhaps partnerships with some charities if that's possible as well.
Absolutely, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much, and appreciate again all the work that's going into this.
Thank you very much for those questions, Councillor Cavanaugh. Councillor Lowe.
Thanks, Chair. So I want to note one of the comments that one of our colleagues had made about making things mandatory, and making recycling and composting mandatory. And what I see is a situation is where however we promote and communicate waste diversion, it's going to plateau at some point. I don't think we'll ever get to 100% on diversion alone. And that's where, because there's no realistic way of truly enforcing it, especially at IC&I, especially at multi-res properties, and in parks, right? In parks, when it blows around from our recycling bins, like this, what that resident highlighted is a legitimate issue in our communities. So, I'm really hoping that when we're evaluating the technologies as part of whatever's coming early next year, that things like that's where the city steps in to fill that last 10%, last 20% that's missing from diversion through mixed waste processing or whatever. So I think that was more of a comment than a question. So in terms of recycling and diversion and whatever at municipal facilities, sometimes we have the bins, actually all the time, we have the bins, right? And people separate their waste as required. Is there oversight? And I'm not suggesting that staff aren't doing their part, but is there oversight to ensure that, people, when stuff is being put out to the back or to the curb or wherever it gets picked up, they're not combining the bags together, because it's easier to carry, or because there's a rat problem, let's say. Is there some sort of oversight to ensure that happens? Does a contractor report back and say, hey, we only collected garbage at the Alexander Community Center?
So maybe I'll start with Councillor, just reiterating Shelley's point. So certainly something we'll take offline to have a conversation with our recreation colleagues, just understanding their policies and procedures internally. We do have, as part of our contracts, our contractors will advise us if they are seeing issues of contamination. I can't speak to it, but certainly it's something I can follow up offline with our colleagues, but nothing that I'm aware of has been flagged as an issue with that. And I think too, what's important, increasing our diversion rate at city facilities also creates quite a significant opportunity for increasing recyclable and organic content and getting that out of the waste stream, which currently goes to our landfill. From some of the waste audits we've partnered with our colleagues on in different facilities, every single different facility, depending on the nature of the operation, is different. So as part of that action, a lot of work will be done comprehensively working with staff in those various facilities, almost on a customized basis, depending on the nature of the operation. So it's also going to be an opportunity to reemphasize some of the importance of waste diversion.
Cool, thanks very much. And I mean, city facilities also includes right here at City Hall, right? We have green bins and in Councilor's Row, for example, sometimes there's 3 things that I see get taken out. So I think we're generating more waste than actual things to divert there. Anyway, that's a side note. I mean, a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask have been asked already, so I won't rehash it, but I do want to extend a compliment to Shelley and her team on helping me deal with the leaking garbage trucks. It's been an ordeal over the last year or two, and you know, I really hope Andre does sleep at some point, because he really does answer emails at all hours of day. But you know, I had raised this in email before, but I hope that, you know, if in the future we do extend contracts again, that this is something that we do consider when it comes to making sure that contractor is able to keep up with maintenance, right? There's what we can expect. There's also a physical limitation to what those trucks can take. So that's something I hope that we'll consider, because it, you know, it does make the contractor look bad, and we can push the blame all we want, but in the end, what the public sees is how we're delivering the service, right? So that's I'll leave it there. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Lowe, and it's true, our solid waste team is great, not just at the policy side, but certainly responding on the operations on the ground. So thanks for those comments. Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Chair. Want to ask about a really specific thing, Action Suite 7, which is waste diversion in parks and public spaces, which will begin next year, take a few years to implement. I'm glad to see this one prioritized. It's relatively small, I think, in terms of diversion, although over 30 years, it adds up to 33,000 tons. But it's important because it's very visible to residents. We get a lot of feedback, particularly around dog waste. But could you give us a little more context about what that looks like? Will it be every park at the end of that 2028 timeframe? Will it be similar, containers be similar to what we've seen in the pilot project, and any other details you can share?
Thank you for the question. And yes, it is a very, very important program, and something that I think all members of council enjoy when we have the announcement of a park that's going to have a 3-stream bin. So just recognizing that there are over 1,000 parks across the city, we are looking to come back with how are we going to outfit the waste services for a particular park. Not all parks probably should receive a 3-stream. Maybe an organic bin is something, because there are a lot of dog walkers, maybe that is the approach to take. There are some areas that have a lot of sports fields, so in that case, recycling bins would be best. So part of what we're coming back with is some of the work that we've been doing to kind of test and trial a organics bin with a garbage bin where there are dog walkers. What's the level of contamination? How is that working? As well, this summer we are promoting or putting out additional bins. We're enhancing the work that Rec and Culture has already done with some of our weekend activities by placing organics 3-stream bins or extra garbage bins in order to facilitate some of these weekend activities. So compiling all of that information plus the success of the 3-bin program to come back with, here is how we're going to roll out for our over 1,100 parks in the city.
Yep, that's a lot of parks, a lot of bins. I was surprised that the capital cost is only $1 million. So that includes all installation, all bins. Like, it seems low to me for the number of parks in the city.
So also recognizing not all of those 1,100 parks will receive the 3-stream bins.
Yep.
And then an additional piece that we're looking into as well is coming back with a standard or a few standard receptacles. So recognizing that if you go across the city, there are some parks that have very tiny, very small. It's almost like a kitchen catcher size waste receptacle, whereas other areas have barrels. So trying to come up with a few more consistent standards that basically we're able to support some of that capacity piece, which helps then on the frequency of collection, because recognizing that when these bins overflow, it causes concern, and our the participants in the parks aren't able to enjoy them quite so much. So these are all the considerations that'll be going into. And if we do at the end of the day find that additional funds are required, then we'll be bringing that back as part of future budgets, as well as updates to the LRFP.
Okay, just a final comment. I think it was Cafes that was encouraging us to speed up implementation, and not specific to this action suite, but on all of them. I think I'll echo that because obviously the sooner we implement each of the action suites, the more we divert or reduce from going to our landfill, the longer the lifespan and the longer we defer that huge cost once our landfill is full. So every month that we can speed up an implementation could literally save us hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So encourage staff, come back to us quickly and let us know what support you need. And I think all of us want to encourage and support you in moving as quickly as you can with each of the actions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gower, and for all your work on that sponsors group too, and attending those meetings at Trail. Next up on the list is Councillor King.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I also wanted to extend appreciation for all the work that staff has done on the solid waste master plan. You know, there were multiple technical briefings, 3 public consultation engagements, individual briefings with councillors, in which I know we're party to many, and we're appreciative of the tremendous number of recommendations that are before us here today. I also wanted to thank the chair for introducing a direction around a hazardous waste depot that's accessible by active transportation in the core. I know there was work done in the last term with multiple councillors from the urban core to enhance hazardous waste depots, and I was my ward is one of the recipients of that near the baseball stadium, and we've seen the tremendous amount of tonnage and people who are participating in those depots. So we know that they're required, and we know that they're also required in the core. Not everybody does have a car, so I do appreciate that direction, and we'll be backing it. I wanted to follow up with what Cafes was suggesting, which was trying to group the multiple action plans, and noting that obviously this master plan is an evolving document. I mean, I don't see it as a static one, but as one that will evolve. I just wanted to ask staff whether you are amenable to their solution. It did seem strange, and I know that there are a tremendous number of priorities in the document, but if we look at the action items, it was notable that the circular economy item was 50 out of 50. And I think what we're hearing from the community is that it should be really one of the first things that we consider. Now, I know that that wasn't a list in terms of numerical priority, but I was just wondering if you were open to that idea of regrouping some of the elements around the circular economy to eventually expedite to go to Councillor Gower's point.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So certainly open to that, and certainly a lot of work went into kind of grouping a lot of the actions as you see in front of us today, and mainly to take advantage of trying to reduce the amount of resources requirement. So certainly something we'll take away, and recognizing too, there are certain strategies such as the hazardous waste as an example, that is much more at a much more advanced place right now, because staff have been working on some of those pieces. For example, we've also been looking at end market opportunities for recycling of mattresses. So wanting to make sure that there are still some of those elements that we might need to advance. They need to fit into the bigger, broader picture, but certainly something to take away. We'll take I guess a second look at how making sure that they're well integrated to try to advance things much quicker.
I appreciate that. And I also, when reflecting on Ecology Ottawa's statements around the different organizations, really to speak to the chair's point around the fact that there would be grants for organizations such as the Tool Library or the Outdoor Gear Library or Eco Equitable, who actually have are very involved in multiple initiatives in my ward across the board. I'm just wondering if staff could provide some more specificity on the grants that community organizations might receive surrounding the circular economy and reuse.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So one of the recommendations as part of the reuse action suite is to develop a grant-based program. So as part of the long-range financial plan, there's an estimated budget of about $350,000 for those entire action suite, but a large chunk of that would be towards a grant-based program. Certainly, we will be coming back to council with the eligibility criteria, but taking into consideration that feedback that we've heard from Ecology Ottawa, but we've also heard through engagement with some of those stakeholders, such as the Ottawa Tool Library and Equal Equitable as part of our work and understanding what their needs are to be able to scale. So that's certainly some of the priority work that we'll be doing over the next couple of months.
I appreciate that and that was integrated into the report because that is definitely something that not just the advocacy groups have been hearing from these organizations, but also elected officials that there needs to be more support to really enhance the work that they're doing because there is a massive cost savings in terms of the small investment that we make versus taking up a larger amount of landfill. My last question just is in a reference to engaging councillors, and I know that in the last term of council, I think that we had a tour of the landfill, which I unfortunately maybe I'm asking about this because I came in, as you know, in a by-election and then COVID occurred. So there wasn't an opportunity to see the Trail Road facility. But I'm just wondering if there's going to be that opportunity for councillors in this term.
Oh, love that question. Yes, certainly we'll take that away. So right now there is a lot of construction activity that's taking place. And so we want to ensure that we're able to safely provide such a tour as well as maintain operations. But certainly I'll take it back and we'll be back in touch, Councillor.
Excellent. Once again, appreciate all the work that's been undertaken on the master plan, and obviously we will continue to follow up, and very thankful for the amount of work that you've done, and frankly the depth and the transparency around that work. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor. And just to the point about the action suite funding process for community groups, reuse events, that sort of thing. Staff have confirmed they're going to do that, and they actually drafted a direction that I'll put forward at the end because community groups are asking for it. But they're doing this work in any event already. So just to get it on the record, I'll put that in at the end of the discussion. But Councillor, on your first round, Councillor Hubley, and then Johnson, and then we'll back to Brockington at the end. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you very much, Chair. Question for staff would be I've seen in reports that up to 50% of the garbage that we are putting in landfills could be recyclables. Does that sound accurate to you?
Yes, Councillor, just over 58% of waste currently going to landfill, and the majority of that is organic food waste.
Okay, and can you tell me what percentage of what we collect in our recycle programs actually end up in landfill?
So about 12% of, there's 12% of blue bin material and 9% of black bin material.
Blue, okay. And because one of the things we learned recently was that if residents are putting recycled plastics out in blue bags, like the clear blue bags, they go to landfill, correct? They're taken out of the recycle program by virtue of the fact that they're in a bag?
That is correct. So through the operations at the recycling facility, we hope that the bags are ripped open, but that would be a waste material that would then go with other residuals to landfill. And at this point, those plastic bags are not recycled.
Okay, but that would make up your 12% of what's in the blue bin. Is that correct? Is that part of that or over and above?
Sorry, Councillor, when I was referring to the 12%, it's when you take a look at what is currently in the garbage bag going to landfill. It's about 12% of that is still recyclable material that is going into the garbage as opposed to into the recycling bin, and that's at the curb.
Okay, no, my question was what's in the recycle bin. So what we're collecting in the blue and the black and the green, what are we taking out of that and sending to landfill? That's what I'm trying to get at, is that percentage. The reverse of that statistic, that 58% of the garbage going to landfill is actually recyclable. Well, I'm trying to get at what is the reverse?
Councillor, we're just going to ask our team to pull that number, but I do believe it's less than 10%.
Less than 10, okay. The Toronto Star recently did a story suggesting that we as a country export 100,000 tons of plastic recyclables a year. We're exporting out of the country. Is Ottawa part of that?
So, Councillor, what I can speak to is before we took, as you'll recall, producers are now responsible for both blue and black box recycling programs in the City of Ottawa. So we transitioned to a producer-based model where producers are fully accountable for the operations, the processing, and the marketing of blue box and black box materials. So that began July 1st of last year. And certainly the intent of the provincial government legislative changes that introduce the individual producer responsibility legislation, the intent is to try to reduce that and to find more local markets. When the City of Ottawa, previously when we were marketing our products, we because of the fact that we have a separate blue box and black box, it's very, clean materials compared to cities like Toronto, as an example, that mix them all into one container. They have higher levels of contamination. And because of that, we were very successful in marketing our products to the North American market.
So to give an answer to residents, are we able to say that everything because you're saying now the producer's responsible for what's in the recycle program. So are we able to or unable to say how much that's in the blue bin actually gets recycled?
Councillor, we no longer have reporting responsibilities as part of the producer-based system. So there is a regulatory governing body at the provincial level that is responsible for enforcing the legislation as well as reporting requirements. So there are reporting requirements, and that I don't have the exact time frame for and the details. I can follow up with my colleagues and get that information in terms of when we would anticipate that reporting, but there certainly will be a lag in reporting.
Okay, thank you. I would appreciate if you get back to me on that, because obviously that's a real concern if we're part of this collecting plastics and putting them out on barges or whatever. My next question for you is, what has been the increase in the diversion rates since you can either use 2010 as a benchmark or go back to amalgamation? I'm trying to get a sense of over the years, how much have we increased our diversion rates?
So, Councillor, I don't have the exact precise diversion rate, so I'll give high level and I can follow up with you. But over the years, the diversion rate has substantially increased, and more so I would look at the past 14 years. So the biggest piece being when Council implemented the organics program in 2011. So we saw a jump, I believe it was about almost a 10% increase at that point in time. We further saw a jump in 2012 with the introduction.
Sorry, can I just interject? You saw in 2011 with the green bin, you saw an increase of 10%.
I believe it was about 10%, but I will follow up with you offline to provide the exact details. Okay. And then we saw another increase in jump in diversion with the introduction of the policy change transitioning to biweekly garbage the following year in 2012. We saw relatively consistent until 2018, 2019, when Council introduced the allowing plastic bags in the green bin program as a liner, as well as dog waste. So we saw another 3% increase in diversion, and over the past year, we've also seen another percentage increase in diversion over last year.
Okay, so that sounds good, but to put it in context, it'd be nice to know what the base number is and how much we have achieved when, this report's suggesting we can increase it another 14% just in a short period of 5 years. So I hope you can get back to me soon with that number. I would appreciate it if it's possible before council.
Certainly, Councillor. We have it in some of our documentation. I just don't have it physically in front of me. So certainly we'll do that before council. And one thing to let you know too, in terms of developing the projections for what you see in the waste plan for waste reduction and diversion, they're fairly conservative estimates. And they're based on the experiences and the real experiences of comparative municipalities. And what we did is also we considered our waste composition as well. So it's applying their lessons learned to what the actual waste composition is here. So they're fairly conservative.
Thank you. And I do appreciate the work you've done in the report. What I'm looking for is information that wasn't in the report that I think would help the report. So thank you very much. That's all my questions for now.
Thanks, Councillor Hubley. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to get a sense of, I know you made reference to every 5 years, of reporting back every 5 years, but given the number of action suites and actions within, I just wonder what level of detail we can anticipate coming back to committee and council versus being sort of internally discussed. I know that many people are very interested in unpacking a lot of your actions that are listed here, but the details are still to come. So could you expand how we can anticipate hearing back from?
So I'll start, and maybe Shelley, if you want to jump in. So the 5-year frequency is when we will do a full refresh of the solid waste master plan, but we will be returning back to council on an annual basis. And as part of that annual basis, what we will be presenting is a detailed update on all of the actions that we've either implemented, that council has approved to be implemented, or that we've been planning within that year. And the intent as part of that annual report will also be including a number of different performance metrics, not only the high level, how we're working towards what we've identified in the waste plan, but as we're developing each of the actions, we will be developing a number of different performance metrics. So that will be on an annual basis is when we're reporting back to council, so that you have clarity and transparency, pardon me, in terms of how these programs are progressing. If they are in fact achieving the outcomes, exceeding or falling short, it allows that opportunity for course correction by council at that time.
So will the council sponsors group continue through this process, or it will be discontinued at this time?
Councillor, the intent is to continue working with the sponsors group, yes.
Thanks very much for all your time as well to that sponsors group and really valuable contributions, those meetings at Trail. Councillor Brockington on your second round, and then we'll go to Councillor Devine on your second round.
Thank you. I just wanted to focus my next questions on the forecasted fee that is being proposed for residential units. And I realize that the amount we're charging as part of the levy now is small. When we talk about percentage terms, percentage increases look large. And I can anticipate that when the public hears that they're going to have a 17% increase in year one, doesn't matter what the amount is, they hear, oh my goodness, my levy is going up 17%. And that will go over like a lead balloon. So I'm wondering if staff had considered a more smoothed approach over the 10 years where we wouldn't have such significant next year 7% increase, then a 10% increase, then a 3% increase. And I can recall when the water rates went up when I first came onto council, and we had water rates well above, almost 3 times the rate of inflation. The reaction from the public, despite the fact that we have to maintain aged water facilities, and that really isn't up for discussion, we have to do it. The public reacted the way they did. So if staff could just talk about your thoughts on how you came up with these numbers and why a more smooth approach was not something that is being recommended to us.
So it was based on the need, and there is a bit of a catching up that needs to happen. Our rates are very, very low. And as part of the 2025 budget, we will be looking at how we look at other efficiencies, what are the budget priorities in 2025? And we could end up pushing some of that out and smoothing it out that way. We could also look at a phasing in of the fee, but that would be part of the 2025 budget, is what is affordable, what is reasonable, and what could be pushed.
But if the financial plan is approved today, then how do these rates get reviewed every year as part of the budget cycle?
So we identify what the operating cost requirements are for 2025, capital cost requirements, and then work backwards based on the number of properties. What is the fee that should be included? So same as the water fees, we look at what is the operating and capital cost requirements, and then back into what is the revenue we need to collect. And so it's always 100% cost recovery. And whatever the cost requirement, that's what we're collecting. Now, if we can smooth that out, absolutely, we will look at that as part of the 2025 budget.
So let me just take on your table here on I think it's page 4 of your financial report to us. We'll just take 2025 as the example. So if we go with the non-status quo fee, the SWMP fee, you're projecting it will go from $227 to $265, which is a 17% increase. So if we pass this today and council ratifies it, how does this number come into play for the 2025 budget? I thought we were making a decision today that the fee would be $265.
No, this is estimated on the pure need. We still have to go through a prioritization exercise, as we do with any budget every year.
So maybe, Chair, just for add on to Isabel's point. So today the recommendation is seeking endorsement to move to a fully rate structure. That's the recommendation. Then what that rate will look like will come back through the budget process. To Isabel's point, in terms of, can we have a more stable, sustainable, increase, as opposed to a little bit of the peaks in the valley.
Yeah, I think despite it being a small number, we're talking about two small numbers. A 17% increase, the optics will be poor. And anyway, like I said, to alleviate some of that significant increase, I think will just be better received by the public. So that's my 2 cents on that. I understand the framework, I understand the background, I understand the need for cost recovery, but also from past experience with water, and again, that's probably our most vital infrastructure we need to maintain. The public reaction to those increases was quite strong. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Devine on your second round, and let's hope you come through clearly.
Thank you, Chair. And if the sound is bad, I apologize. And if it is bad, please just stop me. I'll have my questions offline with Isabel. So Isabel, I want to follow up on the questions that I first asked during the technical briefing. And my questions are on the issue of the equitable rate, the change and how it's equitable to different property value owners. So what I'm looking to understand is the difference on different property values of homes between the current system and the proposed system. So I've got my tax bill right here, and I know that currently I, just like every homeowner, pays $145 as the fixed rate, and then a percentage based on the value of my home as the tax rate. And in the new system, everybody pays the same. So Isabel, would you be able to let me know, in the current system, in addition to paying $145 for the fixed rate, what would the tax rate be for a $300,000 home?
So for a $300,000 home, instead of the $56 for the average, it's $40.
So $40. And what would be the tax rate currently for a home valued at 1.5 million?
So 1.5 million, they'd be paying $200. And I just wanted to note that less than 2% of the homes are above 800,000.
Okay, thank you. The only reason I'm asking, so I'm looking at, so currently the home valued at 300,000, and I believe quite likely currently there's not a high percentage of homes valued at 300,000 valued either, certainly not the same number. So currently the total that a homeowner at 300,000 would pay would be $185. And currently the total that a homeowner of 1.5 million would pay would be $345. I guess this means that in the new system, that homeowner of $300,000 is going to be paying $80 more than they currently pay per year. And the homeowner with the value of 1.5 is going to be paying $80 less than they currently pay. Okay, thank you for that. I just want to digest that between now and council and perhaps discuss it more later. Thank you as well.
And just to correct that, the 300,000 would be paying $40 more.
I want just so I understand what I was trying to. So the $300,000 homeowner pays $145 as the fixed rate. What amount does that $300,000 owner pay currently for the tax rate part?
So a $300,000 home pays a total of $185, and we're saying we're doing a flat fee. Everybody pays $227. That's a $42 difference.
Oh, sorry, yes, $227 for 2024. But okay, so that still means that I'm just adjusting my spreadsheet here. So the $300,000 homeowner would be paying a differential of $42 more. The 1.5 million homeowner would be effectively saving $118. Okay, thank you. I'll talk about more of this more offline, but thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Devine, and understand that that line of questioning for sure. It's important, and I think staff. I don't know if there's been a decision made about phasing that in or not, or if that's your intent in the 2025 budget. Is that waiting until the 2025 budget is presented, or is your intent to phase that in over a number of years?
That would be coming to council as part of the 2025 budget.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Just on Councillor Lowe's questions around, so they're really good around the organics and that, it's hard to get them all out. I did want to just say, because this is something that's been near and dear to my heart, is that clear plastic bags, I think, were the most effective when we researched of all the solutions, and really, I think the cheapest to the municipality too. There's no tags involved. It's fairly, I think cheap. Is that clear plastic bags with a privacy bag to be able to be inserted as people would like had the largest diversion potential of any of the solutions that we looked at. Is that correct?
That's correct, Councillor.
Okay, and just in terms of procedure, that would be that residents would have to put out clear plastic bags instead of the darker bags, and that not put organics and recyclable material in those bags. And other cities like Edmonton, I understand, already do this now. Is that correct?
There are some other municipalities, yes, and most notably a number in Nova Scotia, Halifax, as well as Markup. Okay.
That's helpful. I just think as we think about our next waste solution, like the hundreds of millions of dollars in the future that this municipality is going to have to commit to, this is a very simple, very low cost potential solution that we should also be thinking about. Just given that there's no tags involved, there is some change, but it's fairly simple for a huge impact for the municipality. So I'll just make that comment. A personal comment from me that I certainly want to consider as we consider, the future reports in 2025. I'm going to put that direction in because I've been asked to do it and appreciate you're already doing this, but I want to make sure we're on the record, and thank you for drafting the direction for staff. The Waste Avoidance, Reuse and Reduction Initiative Action Suite recommends the development of a grant program as a way to incentivize waste avoidance, reduction and reuse among a series of other actions, including repair cafes and reuse events in partnership with community agencies. For the purpose of the Solid Waste Master Plan and Long Range Financial Plan, rolled up budget estimates for the first 5 years have been presented. Staff have indicated that an estimated $350,000 per year has been included in the Solid Waste Long Range Financial Plan to fund initiatives in this action suite, and that funding aligns with the council approved Long Range Financial Plan, which will be presented as part of the annual budget process. So staff and solid waste services are directed to work with finance services to develop a comprehensive process to present annual budget requests for each action suite, supplemental to the budget tabling process every year, and staff are further directed as part of the development of a grant program to be presented to council for approval to include the grant funding as part of the multi-year budget, the first year to be approved by council as part of the annual budget process, and the final 3 years identified as forecasted to provide transparency to community agencies and partners wishing to apply for financial support. I recognize you're already doing this work, so thank you for that. So I think with that, we are the report recommendations. We're doing two here. We're doing the solid waste master plan report recommendations first. So are those recommendations carried? Thank you for that. And then now it's the solid waste long range financial plan, which was also presented and discussed today. Are those recommendations carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much for that. It's appreciated, and congratulations on all your work as a staff team. I do want to move, and I want to just question committee to see if we want a 5-minute break or not. But the next two items we were going to consider together is the tree program review and the tree equity analysis. We have one delegation that's speaking to both, so I'll ask that delegation hopefully to speak to both in their delegation. Do you folks want a 5-minute break before we continue, or you okay? Okay, you got a sandwich already. Okay, so are we going to just continue on then? Yeah. Okay, good. Let's power through. So we'll do the tree program review, early actions, and the tree equity analysis all in one presentation by staff, and then we'll have delegation. So I'll ask the tree team to come up and present. Thanks for being here, and feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, Chair and members of committee. We're here today to present 2 companion reports on early actions under the tree planting strategy. We're very excited to be back here just 1 year after launching the tree planting strategy last June as a part of the Urban Forest Management Plan work plan. I'm Martha Copestake, Senior Planning Forester with Climate Change and Resiliency Services, and I will be talking about the proposed methodology for a tree equity analysis to prioritize tree planting in Ottawa. With me is Tracy Schwetz, Program Manager for the Forest Management Branch in Public Works. Tracy will be talking about 3 proposed tree planting program changes, all of which demonstrate quick action on the objectives of the tree planting strategy. We're supported today by Allison Downs, Director of Parks Maintenance and Forestry Services, Will McDonald, Director of Climate Change and Resiliency Services, Nick Stowe, Program Manager of Natural Systems, and Zoe Bedford, who is one of our new planning foresters and has been working hard on tree equity and the recommendations of the report before you today. The tree planting strategy is the feature project under the Urban Forest Management Plan for this term of council. It's a joint project between Public Works and the Strategic Initiatives departments. We appreciate all the valuable feedback that we've received through consultations with members of council and members of the public who participated in our Engage Ottawa survey this spring, as our team has worked to finalize these recommendations. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start the presentation with an overview of the tree planting strategy. Then I'll present on the proposed. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Then I will present on the proposed tree equity analysis methodology. After that, I'll pass it to Tracy to go over the 3 tree planting program proposals. First, the proposed changes to the commemorative tree program. Second, the proposed approach to proactive replacement of trees in the city-owned right-of-way. And third, staff's recommendation for a new private land tree planting program. Next slide, please. The objective of the tree planting strategy is to provide the residents of Ottawa with equitable access to urban forest canopy cover through proactive tree planting. The tree planting strategy itself is a set of principles and the development of programs, actions, changes, and policies to meet those principles. It supports the official plan target of reaching 40% canopy cover over time. The strategy is action focused and it will shift the city's approach to tree planting from reactive to proactive. It looks to increase tree species diversity in Ottawa's urban forest. And the strategy is using a neighborhood lens and taking an equity approach to prioritize tree planting in areas of the city that need it the most. And this is what the tree equity analysis is about, how staff propose to get trees planted in those areas of the city that can most benefit from an increase in canopy cover. The tree planting strategy actions are being rolled out for approval incrementally over time, which will enable quicker action to implement change. And we're here today with the earliest actions under the strategy. We expect that we'll be reporting back several times over the next few years with other proposals for changes and/or new programming. Next slide, please. So I'll just do this one quickly, just some legislative context around tree equity. So one of the 4 council strategic priorities for this term is a city that is green and resilient, and an associated strategic objective for that is to plant, grow, and preserve urban tree canopy with a focus on neighborhoods of low tree canopy. The work under the tree planting strategy will help meet the official plan policies on the urban forest, specifically the canopy cover target, which includes direction to use equity as a guiding principle. And the work is also in line with the climate resiliency strategy, which directs to enhance tree canopy cover, increase shade, and generally raise awareness around the value of trees. Next slide, please. So what is tree equity? It can be defined as having enough trees in an area so that all individuals can experience the multitude of health, climate, environmental, and economic benefits that we all know trees provide. The distribution of urban tree canopy is frequently associated with socioeconomic factors. Lower canopy covered neighborhoods often have a strong representation of equity-deserving communities. These communities can be more susceptible to the impacts of climate change and are at risk of not receiving the full benefits provided by the urban forest. Addressing these canopy cover gaps can improve overall community well-being in these areas. As I've said, the equitable distribution of tree canopy is a guiding principle for all work under our tree planting strategy. However, the city requires a methodology to identify and prioritize tree planting in areas of the city that will most benefit from trees. Next slide, please. To determine tree equity for Ottawa, staff recommend using the tree equity score methodology developed by an organization called American Forests. American Forests is a nonprofit organization out of the States founded about 150 years ago. They're focused on creating healthy and resilient forests. They've calculated a tree equity score using this method that we're proposing for nearly every urban area in the United States. In the image on this slide, you can see how tree equity is represented for Buffalo on American Forest's online tool that they have for cities across America. American Forest has also worked with organizations in the United Kingdom to apply the method there nationwide, and the City of Toronto has also committed to using this approach. It's been found that this methodology not only highlights the relationship between socioeconomic factors and tree canopy cover distribution, but it's also helped to mobilize community groups and municipalities to lessen those inequities through tree planting. So it's a proven and well-tested methodology. It's really a best practice. Next slide, please. The tree equity score evaluates the equitable distribution of tree canopy by using socioeconomic, health, and canopy cover data at a census block level. The score considers the relationship between tree canopy and human-focused measures of inequity to score neighborhoods in terms of their need for tree planting. So the human measures are incorporated through socioeconomic data from the census and health data from Ottawa Public Health. The data used was selected by American Forests to identify communities at the greatest risk of not receiving urban forest benefits. So this approach will produce a tree equity score at a census tract level. So the scores will identify very local level gaps in canopy cover. Areas with lower tree equity scores will be priority areas for tree planting. Staff will undertake the analysis in-house. This isn't something that needs to be contracted out. American Forest has made the methodology very transparent and with step-by-step guidance so that any municipality or area can adopt it. Next slide, please. From an implementation perspective, the tree equity analysis will not only help identify and prioritize areas of the city for tree planting, It can also help to provide the community context needed to tailor tree plantings to meet those needs and interests of the communities in the priority areas. It can assist in understanding the challenges and pressures unique to the priority areas and how tree planting can contribute to alleviating those challenges. And the analysis will also help both kickstart partnerships and build on existing networks because of the deeper understanding of those areas. If this approach is approved for Ottawa, the tree equity scores would be made available on Geo Ottawa, so the publicly available. Next slide, sorry. So the report recommends to direct staff to undertake the tree equity analysis using American Forest's methodology and to use the results of that analysis to prioritize tree planting under the tree planting strategy. In terms of next steps, if approved, staff will undertake the tree equity analysis using the city's new canopy cover data, which will be available very soon. Staff plan to report back in the fall on both the tree equity analysis and the new canopy cover data. This will include the identification of the first set of priority areas and an action plan to address the new data. Next slide, please. So I'm now going to pass it over to Tracy to go over the elements of the tree planting programs report.
Thank you, Martha. Next slide. Commençons tout d'abord par l'examen du programme d'arbres commémoratifs. Le programme actuel vise à permettre la plantation d'un arbre dans un parc municipal à la mémoire d'une personne décédée. Le coût est de 400 $ et comprend l'arbre, son installation et son arrosage pendant 3 ans. La plaque commémorative est optionnelle et elle doit être achetée par le client. Elle est installée sans frais par la ville. En moyenne, 100 arbres sont plantés chaque année. Le programme d'arbres commémoratifs vise la récupération des coûts. Toutefois, les frais et le cadre du programme n'ont pas beaucoup changé depuis la fusion municipale. Next slide. In March of this year, an Engage Ottawa site was launched for the tree planting strategy, which included the first survey on tree planting programs with detailed questions on the commemorative tree program. Staff also held consultation sessions with councillors and attended the CAPES Forêt Capitale Forest Tree Caucus for input on current and future programming. In addition to this, information was gathered from many different municipalities across Canada for various aspects of the programs under review. With respect to the commemorative tree program, we heard that there is a desire to expand eligibility. We also heard from councillors that we should be recovering costs. We know that many other municipalities have tree commemoration programs, and many have a wider eligibility for things like birthdays, anniversaries, or other milestones. With respect to plaques, some other municipalities offer plaques of varying styles. Some do not offer plaques. Others have a mix of plaques and no plaques in their programming. From staff's review, there is a large administrative burden with the current program, and plaques are a main contributor. This is mainly from the back and forth with current clients and past clients, coordinating wording, internal and external translations, issues that arise around maintenance, requests to move or change plaques after installation, coordination with other departments when plaques or trees are impacted by construction. Increased uptake over the past several years is exceeding staff's capacity to effectively administer the program while managing other planting programs that have a greater impact on our tree planting efforts. As designed, the new program satisfies both the desire to expand eligibility while significantly reducing the administrative tasks related to plaques. Next slide. The new program would be rebranded the Tree Dedication Program. This is to provide a clear delineation between the old and new programs for residents and staff. There would be 2 streams, personal dedications and community dedications, and I'll go through these on the next slides. Some of the highlights are that hard costs would be fully recovered. For those trees that have plaques, the procurement would fall to the city as opposed to the client, and this will improve efficiency and compliance on plaque specifications. Residents will have the opportunity to visit and select from predetermined locations on Geo Ottawa. The program will align with the municipal commemoration policy, which will be considered at Community Services Committee next week. As designed, there would be no requirement for additional staff resources for implementation. Next slide. Again, there would be 2 streams for the dedications. The first is personal dedications. This is for the loss of an individual or personally significant milestone, event, or accomplishment. The dedication would be recognized with a tag on the tree as opposed to a plaque, and a new tree dedication layer on Geo Ottawa. The cost would be $995, and this is for the cost recovery of the tree, the installation, watering for 3 years, private utility locates which are required for parks, and the tag. Next slide. The second stream is for community dedications. This is for community leaders, milestones, events, or accomplishments significant to the public at large. The dedication would be marked with a plaque and on the tree dedication layer on Geo Ottawa. There would be a vetting process established with staff in RCFS under the municipal commemoration policy, and the cost would be $1,750. Again, this is for the cost recovery of the tree, the installation, watering, utility locates, and the supply and installation of the plaque. Next slide, please. Examinons maintenant la plantation d'arbres sur les emprises municipales. En ce moment, le remplacement d'arbres sur les emprises est une mesure principalement réactive. Dans la plupart des cas, il faut recevoir une demande ou l'adhésion de la part du propriétaire foncier adjacent. Les remplacements sur les emprises se font de deux façons différentes. Dans le cadre du programme Fonds des arbres sur les rues résidentielles ou au moyen de projets de paysage de rue sur les rues non résidentielles. Next slide. Through consultation and municipal scans, we heard that trees should automatically be replaced where space and conditions permit. We also heard that there may be some resistance from residents to have a tree if they do not want a replacement. Some other municipalities do proactive replacements. Some do, not all do. From staff's review, we know that internal data tracking and replacement processes need to be improved. And this is mainly around storm situations where field operations crews and forestry inspectors are triaging and making conditions safe. There's not often the time to action the replacement, and the resident is asked to call back to request the tree. If this doesn't happen, it's a lost opportunity for tree planting. Next slide. Looking at the data for right-of-way removals versus replacements, we're currently replacing about 33% of the trees removed by forestry services on the right-of-way. To close that gap, we would need to increase our caliper tree planting by about 2,000 trees per year, which is about a 60% increase to our current caliper tree planting operations. Next slide. Pardon me. The proposed approach is that trees will automatically be replaced on the right-of-way when it's removed by forestry services. The onus will no longer be on the property owner to ask for the replacement or send back a form to opt in. The Trees and Trust program will continue to run citywide for planting in locations that are new, so where there's no tree planted before. Staff proposed to scale up over 3 years to attain the additional 2,000 trees per year. Watering will continue for additional 3 years. It is estimated to require 1 FTE and approximately $3 million for the full phase-in as it's proposed. Once the proactive right-of-way replacements are underway, one of the next steps under the tree planting strategy will be to identify where the opportunities are for tree planting in priority areas as identified through the tree equity analysis. This is to fill the gaps where there are currently no trees planted in those priority areas. Next slide. La dernière mesure active est le nouveau programme de plantation d'arbres pour le domaine privé. Actuellement, la Ville n'a pas de programme visant la plantation d'arbres sur les terrains privés résidentiels. En août 2022, une motion avait été présentée pour demander au personnel de fournir des options favorisant la plantation d'arbres sur les terrains privés à la suite du décret. Nous savons que les terrains privés constituent une ressource importante pour améliorer la forêt urbaine dans les secteurs prioritaires où le couvert forestier est faible. Il y a un avantage supplémentaire à la création d'un programme pour les terrains privés. Il permettrait d'accroître l'éducation et la sensibilisation du public concernant l'intendance de la forêt urbaine chez les résidents. Next slide. In the Engage Ottawa survey, private lands ranked high for where residents would like to see trees planted in their neighborhood. Private lands were the third highest after streets and green spaces. The city had a program from 2007 to 2010 where we did tree distributions. We heard these were very popular and residents would like to see some kind of tree distribution return. Through the municipal scans, we also know that many other cities have some type of private land program. Next slide. The proposed framework for a new private land tree planting program will be offered to residents at no charge. This is to reduce barriers to tree planting and provide an incentive to plant trees. It would be a cycle of citywide tree distribution events in the spring and full service tree planting in each fall in priority areas as identified through the tree equity analysis. To start, the spring distributions would be for 1,200 trees, so 50 trees per ward. The full service planting will start with 50 trees spread over the priority areas that are identified through the equity analysis. The full service removes all barriers to tree planting by bringing the tree to the resident and assisting with identifying the planting location, species selection, planting of the tree itself, and guidance for aftercare. The first cycle is estimated to require $234,000. The program is scalable in future years depending on uptake and resources. Next slide. The recommendations of the report are to approve the amendments to the commemorative tree program to be rebranded as a tree dedication program with a fee schedule for personal dedications and community dedications. To approve the approach to proactive right-of-way tree replacements as outlined in the report, and also to approve a new private land tree planting program. Next slide. Lastly, these are the next steps should recommendations be approved. The tree dedication program does not require additional resources. Staff can begin working immediately on the detailed implementation plan for the new program with a goal to open intake in the late fall 2024 for planting in 2025. Once funding is determined for proactive right-of-way replacements, internal processes will be adjusted, site inspections will take place, planting contracts secured, and outreach will happen to residents. With current resources, 1 year of the private land tree planting program can be implemented in 2025. So 1 tree distribution in the spring and a full service planting in the fall in priority areas. Work will begin on a detailed program design and implementation plan. Communication and engagement with residents will happen prior to the launch of the program. Implementation of the right-of-way replacements and continuation of the private land tree planting program past 2025 will require additional resources. Staff are working with finance on a funding strategy for these 2 programs, which will include exploring internal and external funding sources, such as the recently announced Federation of Canadian Municipalities Growing Canada's Community Capital Grant. Staff are currently have an application underway to that program. Any remaining requirements will be requested by the city's annual budget process. I can share with you that one of the projects that we'll be doing next under the tree planting strategy is to look at the various funding opportunities for planting programs in the future. In addition to grants, this could include opportunities for sponsorship and donation towards tree planting projects. Next slide. The tree planting strategy has many elements to come over the next several years, and we're pleased to bring forward 4 early actions today. With a tree equity analysis to guide the shift to proactive tree planting, we will ensure that all residents of Ottawa have equitable access to the main benefits that trees provide to our environment and our community. Collectively, these actions will contribute to increasing tree canopy. We will be returning for updates and recommendations as future projects are completed. On behalf of Martha and our leadership teams, I'd like to thank you for your time today and for your considerations, these very important steps towards a green and resilient city. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all your work and presenting both of those reports at once. I just wanted to, I want to make sure we've got quorum. If there are members on the committee online, if you could just briefly turn on your camera. Thank you. Okay. I just want to make sure we've got enough in the room. Perfect. Thanks, Councillor Kavanaugh, Devine, and Lulaf and Brown. So we are going to move to delegations now. Erica Shardlow is our first delegate, and Erica has submitted on both items. Erica, if you're able to speak to both items in one presentation, that would be very helpful. And obviously I'll give extra time for that, just given you've registered for both.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can hear you. Thanks.
Wonderful. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Erica. I'm a program coordinator at Cafes Ottawa. Next slide, please. So as many of you know, Cafes is a local network of environmental and climate leaders, and our aim is to promote local action, build community, and advocate for a greener, healthier city. Our membership and representation has been consistently growing, and we're very happy about that. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So it's just an overview. Today, I'd like to mostly share our support for the proactive tree planting program, the private land planting program, the equity focus, community engagement, as well as some brief points towards the end on stewardship, invasives, and non-native species. Next slide, please. So first, Cafes strongly supports the proactive planting of right-of-way trees, including replacing trees and planting new trees in gaps, especially in equity areas. We are very pleased to see the report statement that 2,000 more caliber trees will be planted per year as a result. Cafes has widely supported the Trees and Trust program in the past by handing out brochures, and automatic proactive tree planting was always like what we were advocating for as a next step. And as we know, right-of-way trees in urban areas face very harsh conditions like salt, pollution, damage, very compacted soil, and very small spaces. So one of the best things that we can do for our tree canopy is to ensure that new trees are being given the conditions that they need to thrive for decades into the future. And this includes proper soil volumes, choosing suitable species for each space, with an absolute priority for large shade trees. With climate change and like the heat that we're seeing even just this week, we really, really need that cooling and the shade and all the other benefits that trees provide. Next slide. So we definitely support the proposed private land tree planting program as well, offering trees both citywide and in priority areas. The no cost to residents is a very important component, and private property is one of the most impactful ways to increase tree canopy, which the report states. Cafes has held some free tree giveaways on Mother's Day the past 2 years in a row with excellent uptake. So we do think that a program like this would be extremely well received. We have found from our experience that there are a lot of people that don't know a lot about tree care, especially when the trees are young, including watering the trees. So education is definitely essential, and we are happy to see that it would be part of this program. Next slide. We absolutely support equity being a bigger focus. We do have the 40% cover target, although we really do need to see that 40% canopy in each neighborhood to have the effect that we want. Having trees in other areas is wonderful, but will not provide those same benefits to the people living in tree deserts. But this is why we are so pleased to see this focus being so identified in the early actions of the tree planting strategy. In terms of the tree equity analysis tool, this does look very positive. One of our first thoughts was that we do already know where the neighborhoods are that are lacking in trees, but we do understand that a formal methodology is needed and very beneficial. And it did seem really good and really interesting that this tool's rating is used in conjunction with socioeconomic and health measures to paint a more holistic picture. That's not just about tree stats, but also takes into account those health factors and other public health data. So that is very interesting, and we are looking forward to seeing what comes of that if it moves forward. Next slide. We were extremely grateful for city forestry staff attending the last Cafes and Foray Capital Forest Trees and Green Space Caucus. This was back in April. We had a really, really rich discussion on current tree programs, potential future tree programs, and our caucus members shared a lot of feedback. We definitely invite staff to come back to our future caucus meetings to continue these excellent discussions. It was really great. Community does know, like they really do know what's best for their neighborhoods, especially when it comes to identifying plantable spaces. So when it comes to the proactive planting in gaps, we highly recommend in-depth collaboration. Next slide. So just a few points here. Community stewardship is important as well, and a great way to manage invasive species in particular. Again, communities really know their areas. They know where invasives are. And there are so many Cafes members and volunteers that are really happy to work closely with the city. So we're definitely in support of the city streamlining this approach to apply for stewarding opportunities. We are also hoping to see non-natives removed from the city's tree species list where possible, especially for the private land planting program. From a biodiversity perspective, native species provide essential habitats and sources of food and shelter for native wildlife. Many non-natives also have invasive tendencies, especially the calorie pear tree, which should be removed. Next slide. So thank you very much. That's everything. But we just really appreciate the opportunity to share our support for these programs, and we are really looking forward to hearing the next steps if they are able to move forward.
Thank you very much for that delegation. Did you have anything to add just on the either item? Just I noticed you took less than the full minutes for both items, so.
That's okay. We kind of combined everything into our one presentation, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm not seeing questions and appreciate your presentation today. Next up is William Van Geest with Ecology Ottawa. Wasn't
Thank you.
Earlier, now he's online.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Are you able to hear me okay?
We can hear you. Great,
thank you. So yeah, thanks for another opportunity to address you. And as you mentioned, I'm doing so on behalf of Ecology Ottawa. So of course, we're very pleased to see the proactive approach to tree planting on the right-of-way proposed in this report. The climate and biodiversity crises demand immediate, decisive action, and this proposed measure will help address both. More trees and right-of-ways will increase food and habitat for wildlife, help manage stormwater and mitigate the heat island effect, provide much needed shade to people walking, rolling, biking, or sitting along our streets, and on, you know the list. But also a proactive approach enjoys substantial community support, as the survey in the report showed. This said, we'd like to see the targets increased. The target of 2,000 trees annually proposed in the report will only keep up with right-of-way trees lost. Well, we're short on recent data on our canopy cover, unless I missed something here. 5 years ago, our citywide average cover was 31% in the urban area. And it's hard to imagine with the derecho, ice storm, tornadoes, as well as just normal tree loss, that this percentage has increased. We need targets that increase tree cover. We also recall that the mayor promised that 1 million trees will be planted during this term of council. We don't at the moment know where that promise stands, but it's hard to believe that it's been fulfilled. Where would funds for this come from? Well, in part, we stand by our request during Budget 2024 considerations last fall for increasing funding to accelerate the urban forest management plan's implementation. But in part, we also think the city needs to start accounting in monetary terms for the benefits that trees offer, which we know vastly exceeds the cost to purchase, plant, and maintain them. Trees are an excellent investment, and we should be forthright and precise about this. We're also pleased to see the rollout of this program informed by a tree equity analysis. Research, of course, shows that low canopy cover often correlates with communities with equity-deserving populations. And the official plan's commitment to equity, of course, demands that we prioritize these communities. Moving on to the commemorative tree program, or I guess what's now been dubbed the tree dedication program. This is a great way to get more trees in the ground, and also, of course, forging personal connections to them, to say nothing of the commemorating itself. We noted, however, that the commemoration of pets is not recommended in the report, or the report recommends to not adopt that portion without any reason given. We think pet commemoration should be admissible. Apart from people's valid desire to honor animal companions, the program is intended to operate on a cost recovery basis. Allowing pet commemoration just means more trees in the ground, so we all benefit. Finally, about the private land tree planting program, we're pleased to see this program too, of course. As you may know, Ecology Ottawa has actually distributed over 60,000 seedlings for planting on private property over the last 10 years. So we're pleased to see the city catching on to the idea. And as an aside, we'd be happy to share our experiences with this program beyond those mentioned in the report. Oh, sorry, beyond those mentioned in our report online on our program. But we think the selection of recipients is critical to this program's success. Research shows that civic engagement correlates to higher incomes, for example, and so without intervention on the city's part, most of those in a position to take advantage of the program are those least in need of it. Moreover, the report recommends 50 trees per ward per year, plus an additional 50 trees for priority areas. For one thing, 50 trees for priority areas seems far too low. These have to be spread across the entire city. They'll be used up in no time at all. For another, canopy coverage varies substantially from one ward to another, and I don't mean to pick on wards here, but our latest numbers, or that I've seen anyway, are that Somerset Ward has a 22% tree coverage, and College Ward a 48%, more than double. But also even within wards, coverage varies substantially from neighborhood to neighborhood. At the very least, site selection for distribution should be done at the neighborhood level. In fact, almost 2,000 people signed our petition at Ecology Ottawa calling for neighborhood level application of the city's canopy targets. Finally, and very quickly, species selection. The report mentions privileging species diversity and tall trees as sites will allow. These are both good, but we must also privilege native species and ideally keystone species if we want to benefit the ecosystem. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. Appreciate seeing you again on this item. I'm not seeing questions, so we're going to move on to the next delegation, which is Stephanie McNeely. And I think Stephanie may have been registered for both items too, so please feel free to speak to both items as desired.
That's great. I prepared a short presentation as well. So I wanted to introduce myself, Stephanie McNeely. I'm one of the founders and co-directors of Forêt Capitale Forest. We're a small nonprofit that operates in the city. We're in Blackburn Hamlet. Some of you have been to our base of operations there. And so our first message is one of congratulating the forestry team. This is a great move in the right direction. And so we've been following the urban forest management plan for a while now, and it's very exciting to see what stage you're getting to. I think it's great when everyone can work together. So I am bringing a message of collaboration as well. So on our first slide, you see a little bit about how our organization works. And so we're very much about connection, networking. Sustainability is a giant pillar. Is why we created this organization, and our power is the people who volunteer with us. Many find it's just amazing to get out there, get your hands dirty, plant a tree. But my message today is also about more than just planting trees. On the next slide is a little bit about the work we have done in our plan, and similar to the urban forest management plan. Dr. Andy Kenny assisted us with ours. We started in the east of Ottawa because that's where most of us live, and it's where the Just Food Forest is. In blue on that map, you'll see the Melbourne area, so the lungs of the city. What we're really trying to do is find plantable areas, and I know this is a little closer to the second item of equity, and instead of individual tree plantings in the right-of-way, but it's all related. Our mission is to plant the right trees in the right place, in the right conditions. And so we feel that we've got a very science-based approach for that. And it's very aligned with what the city is doing. And we've had meetings over the past years with staff. So we're very excited about this next step you're taking. On the next slide is, again, kudos with your steps on equity. I think this is very important. Again, heat streak this week. This is your data from a few years back, but not all areas of the city are affected the same way when we have a lot of hardscaping and asphalt and hard surfaces. The temperature differentials are just enormous. And so if we go to the next slide, one of the things we've been piloting is this approach to launching programs, learning from them, improving. We generally plant 100 to 200 trees at a time, and we're really focused on seeing them through to the free to grow stage, which is really where these 2 or 3 year old trees we plant get to a stage at age 5 to 7 where they can survive on their own. There's no longer the big competition with weeds and other plants nearby. So really that's where we think we can help the city and assess and adjust. Volunteers are our core strength, and I see a lot of that in the documents presented today as well. what the US is doing in many places, is creating this this core of forestry volunteers that can get a bit of education, learn how to prune and maintain and water. And so a lot of our team today are actually doing tree seed collection training so that they can better help with the supply chain. So we really are looking forward to collaborating more with the city as you move this plan forward. I think that's one of the messages we're bringing. And just on the next page, I mean, I think we are a little Ottawa success story. In our 4 years of existence, we have successively beat our previous year, which is a good news story in the fight against climate change. So we're up to over 6,000 trees and shrubs. The last set of data you see is 2024, but we're on track to surpass last year. And so what the city is proposing with the private lands and hopefully city lands as well, you are a major landowner, is that we can collaborate with you to do more of this community tree planting and to improve outcomes and coverage. So my very last slide, and probably Councillor Plant will recognize this, but is tiny forests. So we've now implemented 10 in the National Capital Region, one of which is in Lower Town at the York Street Public School, which we did with Enviro Center, and really tremendous funding from the Josette Robertson and Joan Johnson Family Foundation. And with Ecology Ottawa helped publish this Tiny Forests Guide. So I think that's a really great example of collaboration in this space, and very excited for the city to be joining on this. And I guess it all boils down to priorities and budgets. And so if that's another final message, is putting as much as you can into this and being bold with tree planting in the city. Kudos to the team, and thank you very much for your efforts. Looking forward to working with you.
Thank you very much for that excellent delegation, Stephanie, and all that information. Really interesting to see that map and your work there to begin. I'm not seeing questions at this time, but again, appreciate you being here and the support. I think we're going to move to committee comments, questions, debate and discussion. Vice Chair Carr, you're up first. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you very much, staff, for all the work on these pieces of work that are so important to everyone in Ottawa. I'll just say I really applaud the efforts on the equity piece. I think just even looking around my ward, when I look at the areas that are high on the neighborhood equity index, such as Herongate and Russell Heights, you know, those are the areas that are virtually just pure heat islands with no trees. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that implemented. I have a couple questions. The commemorative tree program, there was a backlog on that program for a number of reasons, I believe, partly the loss of trees from the derecho, but at the time that it was paused, it was a significant backlog. What elements of the new program do you think will help reduce that backlog? Is it the increase in trees, more staff dedication? If you could speak a little bit to that, I'd appreciate it.
Through you, Chair. So we've had a significant uptake in the program over the past several years. We had about 130 requests on our list when we paused the program. Those are being actioned this year. The changes to the program are aiming to increase efficiency for staff. One of them is we are planning to have predetermined locations on Geo Ottawa, so residents can go and visit as many sites as they like to choose their location. So that's making it more efficient on the staff side. The reduction in plaques is going to be a really big part of making that program less administratively heavy for staff. We will also be looking at the tree tags and new tree dedication layer, reducing those administrative tasks associated with plaques and translation potentially. We didn't have a program before where for these types of special commemorations, what we're calling community dedications now, which required staff time to go for motions to committee and council to have those approved. So we're hoping that this, working with our colleagues in our CFS to have a vetting process would eliminate the majority of those motions to council.
Okay, thank you. And when people purchase a commemorative tree, it's really an asset to the city as well as a commemoration. And I know that other cities are able to issue a tax receipt. Is this something that was looked at all in the context of your review, whether or not the city of Ottawa would be able to issue a tax receipt?
Yes, through you, Chair. Thank you for the question. We do now issue tax receipts, charitable tax donations for commemorative trees, and we'll continue to do that in the future.
Okay, excellent. Perfect. I didn't see that anywhere on the website. Just a few other quick questions. I know I've asked you this question before, but I'm just going to ask it out loud. With respect to the non-native species that are currently used in the tree programs, what are the plans for using native trees in these programs? And in what cases would you still continue to contemplate non-native? I heard one of the delegations mention, I think it's the Barbary pear, which Councillor Menard, I understand, is not the kind of pear tree you have on your front lawn.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So planting native species is obviously very important. We do recognize that there are some locations in the city, those harsher urban locations, where native trees may have a more difficult time to survive. In the end, we want trees to be successful and for them to be there in the long term. If that means planting a non-native, non-invasive species instead of a native tree, then we will opt for those non-native species. This report is really about providing the framework for these new programs. Under the tree planting strategy, a separate project will be to look at our tree species lists, what we're planting now, why we're planting it, why we shouldn't be planting what's on the list now, looking at other municipalities. City of Hamilton's doing a review of their right-of-way species right now, working with our nursery suppliers to see what is available in terms of new cultivars, what sizes they have, the volumes, can they support the volumes that we plant in Ottawa? So that's a separate project in itself that we'll be looking at through the tree planting strategy.
Thanks. Thank you for that. I just have two quick more questions. When you do a tree planting on like a singular tree planting, like with the Trees and Trust or commemorative, what is the survival rate of the trees? And when you do a tree planting en masse, like in a public park or anything else, what is the survival rate like after 3 years on both of those?
Yeah, so we don't have specific stats on tree survival. We have maintenance quality standards where when a tree is planted in a park or on a city's right of way, that we're watering that tree for 3 years. So it is revisited quite often. The third year, we're doing that establishment pruning, and then it goes into our maintenance cycle for our 7-year pruning cycles. So we're constantly revisiting the trees, but I don't have the stats on survival rate at this time.
Okay, thanks. That's understandable. I'll just finish by saying, I know I'm really happy to see the tree planting strategy. I know the UFMP was revised and that whole invasive piece was taken out. I know there's lots more work to come on the tree planting strategy. I continue to struggle with the fact that we plant trees in areas where we have a lot of non-natives because they're so invasive, like buckthorn, and it harms the new planting. So I'm just flagging it that I'll probably come back and hopefully have a discussion before budget time about what we can do to improve our invasive species management. I know we have lots of volunteer groups throughout the city, but I think there's an opportunity for some training standards and for some maybe opportunity for city staff to assist with things like removal of that buckthorn. I've talked to many of the volunteer groups, but anyway, I know that's slightly off topic, but I think it is part of the larger tree strategy. But thank you very much for all your work on all these pieces.
Thanks very much, Vice Chair. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. One of the first things that came out at me from the second one, I think, the one where there's a proactive right-of-way planning strategy is, if this is in a, like, are you talking about the city's right-of-way as in along roads, side streets and stuff, or are we talking about residents' front lawns in a suburban context?
Thank you, Chair. It's both. So we're talking about residential right-of-ways, so that city portion of the right-of-way in front of a home. or it could be the right-of-way in front of multi-residential buildings. It could be the right-of-way along arterial roads. So all city right-of-way, we're looking at proactively replacing those trees when they're removed.
Okay, thank you. And then within the, I think I'll start with the front yard one. Would that be on, is the plan to do it on the city side of the land or the resident side? And understanding there's a 3-year maintenance requirement for new calipers that are put into the ground there. That's the context to it. Like, is it on the city side? And are we gonna do it?
Yes, so it will be on the city's right-of-way. So if a tree was removed, a city tree was removed, the replacement would be on the city's right-of-way, and it would be come under our watering for 3 years. The city would be doing the watering.
Okay, so that means that a tree that's on the private property side will still need to be requested by the resident.
So now if the program is approved for private land tree planting program, we would be able to, that person would be able to request to participate in one of those tree distributions, or if they're in a priority area for the full service tree planting on private property.
Okay, no, that's good to know. And I had some worries about where the right-of-way thing was going, but I'm glad that you sort of cleared that up for me. The second question relates to invasive species. I have a number of areas in my ward that, you know, this was before native species was really a thing and a tree was planted, right? Things like Norway maples, which also have other problems on their own. So I have some residents who periodically do look to remove those invasive species trees. And these are trees that are now mature, like 25, 30 years old. And they want to replace it with a native species. Like, their intention is to actually remove an invasive species tree with one of a native species. Is there perhaps this is not the right place to ask it? We can do it offline if anything, but are there any considerations for people who want to do things like that?
So that would come under the tree protection bylaw, obviously, and getting a permit to remove if the tree bylaw applies. So if it's a protected tree under the bylaw, they would need a permit. And I mean, we do get these requests sometimes, you know, and I think it's something that we have to sort of deal with on a case-by-case basis. And I don't really want to give like a blanket, yes, we would do something like that, because really it sort of depends what the potential risk might be. Do you know what I mean? Like, if they were right up against a natural area and we were dealing with something that we'd have to assess the risk, really. But that canopy cover is really the thing that is very important. So it's not saying that we are continuing to actively plant those trees or anything like that, but we'd have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis, really.
Yeah, and I understand, and I would argue that there are potentially long-term biological benefits, biodiversity benefits to sort of support residents in that effort. But of course, we can talk about that separately. The last question is, as we're sort of ramping up towards, or as we start to ramp up the right-of-way planning strategy. This is on maintenance again. I know that there's one extra FTE. Is that an administrative FTE, or is that more of an operational FTE?
Thank you, Chair. So that FTE, obviously with 2,000 more trees, that's 2,000 more site visits and 2,000 more conversations with residents. So we need, that would be for a field position, a forestry inspector, to process those replacement trees, to have those conversations with residents in those situations where they may not want a replacement, or they may want some guidance on what type of tree. We are planning for that person to be selecting the tree species based on what is on the street in the neighborhood. Again, we will have a conversation with the resident. If they prefer a different tree species that is equally appropriate for the site, we'll do that. But that is a field position, that FTE.
Okay, so that makes sense to me then. Cool, that's it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Plante.
Oui, merci beaucoup. C'était une présentation super intéressante. J'avais 3 questions essentiellement. Le premier, c'est que j'ai beaucoup de décès dans mon quartier. J'ai beaucoup de décès dans mon quartier, surtout avec la vague des surdoses. Est-ce qu'il y a façon qu'on pourrait peut-être faire un genre de bassin d'argent ou recoupler de l'argent pour que s'il y a un décès et puis la famille n'a pas d'argent pour faire un arbre commémoratif, Et il y a, de l'autre côté, il y a une autre personne, puis ils veulent faire un don. Ils veulent dire, OK, si quelqu'un veut faire un arbre commémoratif, puis ils n'ont pas les moyens pour payer pour l'arbre, voilà, je vous donne l'argent pour 2 arbres, mais plantez un et faites un don à quelqu'un d'autre. Est-ce qu'il y a façon peut-être qu'on pourrait gérer cette sorte de situation ou c'est vraiment jusqu'à ce point-ci individuel aux familles individuelles?
Merci. Je vais demander à Julie Jackson de descendre pour répondre en français. Merci, Julie.
Bonjour, conseillère Plante. Donc, c'est une excellente question. À ce moment-ci, la plupart des projets d'arbres commémoratifs, on a le financement qui est des fois fait collectivement par des familles ou des groupes d'amis.
Oui.
Donc, dans le cas que vous proposez, on n'a pas vraiment de mécanisme pour le faire, mais dans le futur, avec la stratégie de plantation d'arbres, on va regarder les différentes opportunités de financement pour différents programmes. Donc, j'imagine que ça pourrait être exploré.
OK, ouais, parce que il y a des gens qu'on veut commémorer évidemment dans la communauté, mais comme vous savez, ils viennent pas souvent de la région ou ils parlent plus avec leur famille mais c'est quand même des gens, à mon avis, qui devraient être reconnus, peu importe de leurs circonstances dans la situation où ils meurent. Alors, oui, je serais très intéressée de commencer ou peut-être faire avancer un projet où on peut garder un genre de bassin d'arbres ou d'argent pour ceux et celles qui ne peuvent pas se permettre de le payer. Okay, and my next question, I often get asked about why we can't plant trees on either King Edward or the Vanier Parkway. I realize it's probably a larger transit issue, but if someone could maybe get back to me offline, either by email, why we can't put trees on those busy roads. We have some trees already that were from the old King Edward when it wasn't a highway in the middle of downtown. But if someone could get back to me why we can't plant trees on those 2 streets, I would appreciate it. The speed has been lowered in the case of King Edward to 40, so it's not really a question of speed, or it shouldn't be. Those speed cameras are quite profitable, but if someone could get back to me as to why we can't do that, I would appreciate it. Sorry, so for the right of way, and I think Councillor Lowe already covered this, there will not be, to my understanding, automatic planting on the right of way. People have to request it, correct?
Through you, Chair. So it will be automatic. So if a tree
Oh, it will be automatic. Okay.
So if for tree replacements, so where a tree was there before, it's been removed, instead of the resident having to request the replacement or opt in by sending back that trees in trust form, the tree would automatically replace if there's space and the conditions permit for another tree to be planted. So that it would no longer require that opt-in for replacements. For planting of gaps, so where there's no tree currently planted, that would still go through the Trees and Trust program at this time. Eventually, we're going to get there where we'll be in priority areas filling those gaps automatically too. But right now, the gaps would still go through the Trees and Trust program.
OK, merci beaucoup. J'ai pas d'autres questions. J'apprécie.
Merci. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. I remember driving home many years ago on Springland Drive after the city had come by and removed every ash tree on the street. Got hit hard by the emerald ash borer, and thankfully now when we plant trees, we diversify the species, so that should something happen to a species of tree, we're not left with the desert that is quite shocking to see when a whole area has lost its trees. So in my ward, began my term with the emerald ash borer, and then we had the 2018 tornado, and then we had the 2022 derecho, and we've had ice storms to throw in there. So trees in River Ward, just like many other wards, have taken a beating the last few years, like I've never seen before. And appreciate the upgrades, Trees and Trust program. It's quite surprising the low uptake. The stats that staff provided. again, we've talked about this before. I just truly never believed that the public thought the onus was on them to call in and request a replacement tree, but that's going to be changed, and I strongly support that. And any engagement and sort of heads up you can give the homeowners will only further increase the odds of success going forward. So you have my full support in that regard. Can I just be reminded, if I want trees planted in a park, so not on my property, but in a park in general, what's the process to make those requests?
So through you, Chair. So we will continue to receive requests for planting in parks. Residents can call 311 and make the request. We often get, we work with a lot of community groups across the city, so we often get direct conversations with our landscape architects and those community groups who would like trees in their neighborhood, in parks and along streets. So we'll continue to have those conversations and implement those projects as we can.
That's appreciated. I've never had one resident ever say there's too many trees in this park. Andrew King posted last week a picture of Mooney's Bay Park, 1979. And the tree line between the sanded portion and the grass was literally a wall of trees. And some of those large trees remain, but we're losing them slowly over time. So how do you determine what the right number of trees are in a park? Mooney's Bay, I think, can absorb more trees, just as an example, 80-acre park. The shade is paramount, I think, to enjoy yourself there for long hours for families who come there and need shade. But we've lost a lot of trees in Mooney's Bay in particular in recent years. So how do you know what that equilibrium point is so that you still have space for recreation, but you also provide trees and shade and other purposes?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, and that is key. So big parks like Mooney's Bay or Andrew Hayden Park, there are a lot of activities that happen there. So staff are looking for those locations that will support the healthy growth of trees primarily. The next step is we circulate all of our planting locations to many different departments of the city, including park planning. What are the activities that are happening there? What are the special events that are happening there? We want the trees to be successful, and we don't want them to be necessarily getting damaged or in the way of, say, cross-country skiing or the Dragon Boat Festival. All of these things have competing priorities, and we want to make sure that we're filling as many of the gaps that we can in those parks while still, being able to balance the activities and that need to happen. Parks need open space as well for playing, impromptu soccer games, and Minnie's little tiny sledding hills on every little bump for a 3-year-old is a place to sled. And we want to be able to balance that with tree planting.
Excellent. I appreciate that. And when I receive your, I think it's semi-annual reports on where trees are planted in my ward, I always go to the parks first. I read them every row, but the park information is much appreciated and well received by the public. Thank you for your reports today. I will be supporting them.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And when I got the briefing from you guys yesterday, I said, you know what, it's a tree thing. Everyone loves trees. This will be quick. Nothing's ever quick, but obviously people love their trees. And I last year actually did the Trees and Trust program myself, so I quite enjoy it. So it's great. Just to follow up on some of the questions I've heard here today, just real brief. When we plant in parks and things like that, I've had to deal with in the past where, just kids or whatever smoking under trees or whatever the case may be. Are we planting trees in parks that are canopy based but prevent the coverage, for areas where we notice that there's gatherings and things like that?
Thank you for the question. So again, when we're looking for locations in parks, we're taking all of those into consideration. What are the sight lines into the park? We want, in some cases, clear sight lines from the road or from play structures. The type of species that we have, large canopy caliper trees, you can see underneath them. So we'll take all of those into consideration. If there's been past issues in the park, we'll take those into consideration as well.
Excellent. And knowing how great these trees are and the many species, people are always surprised. I always keep telling people through my newsletter, yeah, there's opportunities. I got a ginkgo palooper. I don't know what the heck tree my wife decided to get, but it's a beautiful tree. There's a whole menu of them. It's not like they're just planting them. So, I encourage members of council to get that message out there and encourage people to get some trees on their lawn for multiple reasons, whether it's water, sucking up the water in areas, or simply just building better canopies and keeping the heat domes to a minimum. So anyway, I just want to thank you. I know there's a lot of work involved in this, and who knew trees were so contentious? So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tierney and Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you. I suppose I'll be the last. Thank you very much. Who doesn't love trees? Who doesn't love to hug them? Thank you very much. And we did have a briefing, and I do have community associations that have been doing the promotion of tree planting on their own, on private property, on right of way, everything. So I just want to ask you again if you're willing to work with community associations who are making the effort to organize these type of events.
Thanks so much for the question, through you, Chair. Yes, absolutely. As we move into sort of our next phase past these early action items next year, over the next year, one of the big things that we're going to be looking at is sort of like, we know that there is so much public interest in the kinds of stuff that we're talking about in trees and participating in that tree planting and many things around trees. And we want to figure out how the city can collaborate with our partners. We had the presentation from Forêt Capitale earlier. And so what is the best way for us to join in with some of these organizations that are so keen to do really important work, and what does that look like? So that'll be part of what we're looking at in our next phase of the tree planting strategy. We recognize that there's a lot of energy out there. So that's pretty special. Thank you.
Great. And I expect there'll be a cost saving because they've been taking it on their own. And if there's sort of a group buy or something, that would help them. I'm not going to put words in your mouth on that, but if that can be considered, that would be great. The other big thing in my ward is the loss of trees from stage 2 LRT construction. And they're committed to replace 2 or 3 to 1 of the trees. Is there any kind of coordination on that? With the forestry, or are they on their own on that?
Through you, Chair. So we have a person in forestry that is our contact with LRT. So our link to LRT, they connect with us with, to keep us informed of those projects and where trees are being planted. Our intent is to bring those trees into our tree inventory where they're planted on city property, so we know where they are and can put them into our maintenance programs. But we do have yes, we do have a person in forestry that is our main link to the LRT projects.
Okay, that's great. And some of that is on NCC land. Does that make a difference, or is it strictly on the city land?
So we are the main link for the city portion, anything that's going back or removed on city property.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanaugh, and rest of the committee for those great questions, and especially to you for all your work. I'm excited to see the proactive planting approach, and something that many councillors had mentioned the last time we talked about this. So great to see you come back with that recommendation. And I guess my only question is, when do you, I think it's end of 2024 and early 2025, but the maps of where we need to plant, that equity strategy. I saw some action on social media of people saying, look, here's a map here. We already know where we need trees, right? Here's the map ready to go. So we're obviously working with an organization that's been successful at this in the past. So just on that score, in terms of the maps and where and when, how fast we're going to plant, what is the timeline for you to come back with recommendations around the areas that we need to up the ante to get to that 40%?
Thanks so much for the question. And yes, I saw that as well. And I think that this is going to bring a much more sort of integrated approach to the data that doesn't come from just showing the heat map or just showing the canopy cover map. So this brings in all this data. So you didn't ask me about that, but just putting my little plug in for how I think this is a better approach. And then, yes, so we plan to, as soon as we expect that we'll have the new canopy cover data quite soon. And as soon as we have it, Zoe, my colleague, has been working on putting the methodology in place, and we'll be ready to run the methodology. And then we hope to come back, we're planning to come back in the fall to report on not only the canopy cover data and that canopy cover change that we will see, but also the tree equity score for the whole urban area and what that means for our priority areas. And then we plan to get started right away working in those areas. We've already started conversations with our colleagues in community and social services, because we imagine that the priority areas that we'll be identifying will have probably some overlap with the neighborhood equity index priority areas. And our colleagues are very well connected and have really good networks in those areas already. So how we can work with them on consultation and that kind of thing. So the idea is to get this moving as quickly as possible.
That's great to hear, and thanks so much for all of your work. Really appreciate it, and well received by everybody. So we have two pieces to carry. So one is the tree program review early actions. Is this item carried? Fantastic. And then the tree equity analysis. Is this item carried? Thanks very much to committee. There are no in-camera items. Are there any notices of motion for next meeting? Okay, I'm not seeing any inquiries. Haven't seen any. Okay, so we are adjourned. The next meeting of Environment and Climate Change Committee will be on Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. Thanks very much.